Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. I've been a ranger at Pennycliff National Forest going on 11 years now, and I've always believed the forest has a way of remembering things long after people forget. It holds its stories in silence, in the bends of trees and the hush of the moss. Most of my days are routine. Trails to inspect, campsites to clear, radios to monitor. But every once in a while, something happens that leaves a mark. Something you don't talk about at the station. Something you don't forget. One of those things happened last autumn. The air was sharp, brittle, like it could crack under pressure. I was working out of the West Hollow Post that week, a smaller substation near the base of a rocky ravine the locals call Devil's Hollow. It's not marked on the trail maps, not anymore. Most of the visitors keep to the lake trails or the easier loops near the cabins. Devil's Hollow is where the old miners used to dump their tailings, and before that, well, nobody really knows. All I know is that the place makes radios go quiet and compasses spin funny. It started with a call from dispatch. 2 campers had failed to check out of Site 23, a primitive site out near the hollow's edge. No phone reception out there. No reliable trail cameras either. I offered to do the welfare check myself since I was already in the sector. Figured it was nothing. Maybe they lost track of time or had car trouble. By the time I got to the access road, the sun had dipped low and the sky was bleeding orange. The air smelled like dry pine and distant smoke. Not fire smoke, but something older, more chemical. I made the half-mile hike to Site 23, my boots crunching through brittle needles, my flashlight already in hand. The tent was still pitched. A small, cheap dome setup, cold to the touch. No firewood, no coals, no gear. Just the tent and 2 sleeping bags, zipped open but empty. There were no signs of struggle. No blood, no wildlife prints. Just an odd pattern in the dirt around the tent, a series of concentric circles, like someone had dragged the end of a stick in looping spirals. I radioed it in. No response. Not static, just nothing. I tried again. Same result? That's when I noticed the quiet. No insects, no birds. Not even the wind. Just my own breathing and the whisper of my boots shifting weight. It was the kind of quiet that settles on a place like a warning. I looked up and saw them lights. At first I thought it was a drone or maybe a satellite, but these moved differently. Not fast, not slow, just gliding. 3 orbs, pale yellow, barely visible through the trees. They weren't high in the sky. They were in the forest, weaving through the canopy like curious fireflies, except too large, too deliberate. I backed away instinctively, the hair on my arms standing up. The lights stopped, hung still. Then, one by one, they sank through the branches and hovered just above the clearing, maybe 15 feet off the ground. I could feel a vibration in my chest, like standing too close to a subwoofer. The air tasted metallic, my flashlight flickered. And then the whispers began, not from the woods, from inside my head, soft, indistinct, like voices underwater, layered and speaking over one another in a language I didn't know. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking about me. I stumbled back and the light nearest me dimmed suddenly, not like a bulb going out, but like it was being pulled into itself, compressed. It collapsed into a single point, and for a split second I saw something else. Not the forest, not the clearing. I saw bones, dozens, maybe hundreds, lying in a tight spiral around a massive root-bound stone. It looked ancient, older than anything I've ever seen in this country. Carvings like tree rings on the stone's surface, and in the center a hole not dug, not eroded, but grown, like the earth itself had made a mouth. And then I blinked, and I was back in the clearing. The lights were gone, no sound, no wind, just my own ragged breathing and the rasp of my heartbeat in my ears. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. Not jogged, ran. My pack slammed against my back, twigs clawing at my arms as I barreled through the underbrush. I didn't stop until I saw my truck's headlights through the trees. My radio buzzed back to life as I opened the door. Static at first, then dispatch calling my name over and over. I answered, told them the site was empty. No sign of the campers. I didn't mention the lights. That night I couldn't sleep. My dreams were full of circles, of bones and root systems shaped like glyphs. I kept hearing the same fragmented phrase again and again. We are watching what grows beneath. Over the next few days we filed the missing persons reports, logged the abandoned tent, added it to the growing list of unresolved disappearances in that sector. I didn't press it. No one ever does. Not at Graywood, not at Pennycliff. Some things are just left alone. I haven't gone back to Site 23 since. No one has. Last week I was scanning old survey maps in our archives, ones from the 1950s before the park was officially opened to the public. One of them showed a hand-drawn X over Devil's Hollow, next to a note written in faded pencil. Seal the roots, it listens. I don't know what the lights were. I don't know what I saw, but I believe that place is still listening, and I believe it remembers me. I've been working in the Ridgefire district of Shenandoah National Park for over 18 years. That patch of forest east of the McClintock River, the area between Ridgefire Bluffs and the North Switch Trailhead, it's always had a reputation. Old rangers passed down stories about it like warnings whispered in a church pew. Don't go alone past mile marker 42. Don't patrol after dark past the split log shelter. Don't ignore the sound of something walking in rhythm with your own footsteps. I used to chalk it up to ranger lore, the kind of things new guys get told to spook them a little. Hazing, I figured, but I don't think that anymore. It was late October last year. A camper had called in a report of guttural growls around their tent at night. Said it sounded like something was circling. Said it didn't sound like a bear or a coyote. Claimed it stood up. I volunteered to go check it out. I was on the late shift anyway, and the weather was calm. I figured it was a black bear, maybe sick or displaced. Happens more than people think. I packed light, radio, flashlight, .45 sidearm, and a flare gun just in case. Reached the trailhead at 8:20 p.m., well past sunset. It was one of those eerie nights where the moon looks too bright for how quiet it is, like the whole forest is lit up, but nothing's moving. I hiked in toward the northern ridge near the switchbacks. The campsite was already cold when I got there. Fire had long gone out. No sign of the campers, just their tent unzipped and sagging, their gear scattered like they'd left in a hurry. But what got me? There was meat hanging from a tree limb nearby, raw, red, and dripping. Looked like deer, but the way it was strung up was all wrong. Like it had been braided into the branches, no blood trail, no drag marks. I radioed it in, got static, repositioned, climbed higher. Still static, and then I heard it. Crunch. Twigs, footsteps, heavy ones, but not steady like a bear. It was offbeat, as if it moved on two legs, but too big, too heavy. I aimed my light toward the trees. Nothing, just a sea of trunks and shadow. Then I caught something in the corner of my beam. Eye shine. Low at first, maybe 4 feet off the ground. Then it rose. Slowly, 6 feet, then 7, and then it stepped forward. It looked like a wolf if a wolf had the wrong joints and a man's shoulders. Tall, gray-black fur matted around its neck like a mane. Its head was too narrow, like someone had stretched a canine skull and widened the jaw. And the teeth, Christ, the teeth were visible, even with its mouth closed. It didn't charge. It watched. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. It sniffed the air. Then it mimicked a sound. A whistle. 3 notes. Flat, flat, sharp. Just like the sound rangers use when we need a partner's attention. That's when my blood went cold, because I'd taught that pattern to my partner 5 years ago. We used it during patrols when we didn't want to speak. It had been listening, remembering, learning. I backed away slowly, flare gun in hand. I didn't want to shoot unless I had to. I figured maybe, just maybe, I could de-escalate. But then it did something that made me lose all reason. It smiled. Not like a dog baring its teeth, no. The lips curled up. The corners twitched. That thing knew it scared me. I fired the flare. It screeched high, sharp, awful. Not canine. Not human. Something in between. It turned and disappeared into the tree line with such force it knocked bark off half the pines in its path. I ran the whole way back. Didn't stop until I hit the gravel parking lot and slammed the door of the service truck. Didn't sleep that night. Didn't file a full report either. The next morning, we went back in teams of 3. Nothing was there. Tent was gone. So was the meat. Even the tree it had hung from was stripped of bark halfway up like something had climbed it in reverse. No prints. No scat. No evidence. But the next week, 3 hikers went missing between mile 42 and the switchback shelter. No trace. Only thing found was a camera lens cap and a shredded backpack strap. The last photo taken on their camera, a blurry image in the distance. Tall shape between the trees, bent knees. 2 eyes that glowed in the flash like metal. I don't patrol alone anymore, and I don't whistle in the woods. If you ever hear someone whistling near Ridgefire after dark, just keep walking, because sometimes it whistles back. I've worked at Graywood National Park for 10 years, long enough to know when the birds go quiet, something's wrong. That morning started like any other, the kind I'd come to love. Mist curled low over the pines, and the birds were already chirping their gossip into the wind. I took my usual patrol route around the eastern loop, passing Trailhead 9, where the forest thickens and the moss eats the stone. I've always found peace in solitude out here, where the fog carries the scent of wet pine and you can almost hear the heartbeat of the forest. But the quiet wasn't peaceful today. It was hollow, and something was missing. The chickadees, the squirrels, even the ever-present hum of insects. Gone, replaced by this deep, pressurized silence that made my ears ring. I was halfway to the Whispering Woods, a patch of forest I usually avoided when my radio crackled to life. Ranger Taylor, you copy? It was Marla, our part-timer. She sounded off. Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead. We've had a report. 3 campers didn't check out this morning from Site 12. That's near the North Hollow Trail. That hit me square in the chest. North Hollow ran parallel to the Whispering Woods. I'll check it out. The fog had thickened by the time I reached the site. Their tent was there, still pitched, cooler untouched. No sign of a struggle, but no sign of the campers either. Then I noticed something that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. A ring of stones around the fire pit, all turned upside down. No one does that by accident. I circled the site, found a single line of footprints heading off into the forest. Deep, heavy, almost hoof-like, but bipedal, not human. I took a photo with my phone. Then I heard it, a low, rattling growl coming from the trees to my left. Not like a bear, too guttural, too deliberate. I turned slowly, hand on the grip of my revolver. Something massive moved just beyond the brush, fast. It didn't retreat. It paced, watching me, testing me. Then it let out a sound that froze me to the core. A deep, bone-vibrating howl, but one that ended in a sick, almost human choke. I've heard coyotes. I've heard wolves. This wasn't either. Dogman. I didn't believe in it until that moment. I backed away slowly. Whatever it was, it didn't chase. But I felt it thinking. I logged the sighting. Didn't tell Marla everything. I didn't want panic. Just flagged the area and filed an incident report under unusual wildlife activity. But that wasn't the end. The next night I got a call from a nearby town. A local farmer had found something, a deer carcass twisted unnaturally, its ribs spiraling outward like peeled fruit, dumped outside his fence line. He said it wasn't coyotes, said it wasn't bears either. I drove out. He was right. No blood, no tracks, just the smell of wet earth and rot. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the porch light on and my shotgun within arm's reach. The following morning, another hiker came stumbling into the ranger station, pale, shaking, eyes wide like he'd seen death itself. There was something in the trees, he kept repeating. It was big, hairy. It didn't walk. It stalked. When I asked where it happened, he pointed to the trail cutting near the Whispering Woods. That was the third. Then came the fourth. 2 hunters found near Elk Run, alive but in shock. One of them was missing 3 fingernails, torn clean off. Said they'd heard chanting in the trees. Saw a figure standing naked in the cold, tall, long limbs. No face. Just a blur of something wearing a man-like clothes. The word that came to mind was skinwalker. At this point, I was done keeping quiet. I requested full trail closures from HQ, cited unstable terrain and animal aggression. They granted it. But I knew we were dealing with something deeper, something older. I went back out 2 nights later. against better judgment. I needed to know what was haunting my park. I hiked in under a full moon. The air was cold and still. As I reached the ridgeline above Whispering Woods, I heard it again, the whispers, but not like last time, not faint, not passive, louder, closer. They came in waves, overlapping voices in a language I couldn't place, like a dozen people muttering spells under their breath, and beneath them, something else, a heartbeat, not mine, not human. I kept walking. In a clearing just off the trail, I saw it, a tall figure, hair like moss, thick and black, broad shoulders, eyes glowing faintly red. It stood half in shadow, half in the moonlight, and for a moment I thought, Bigfoot. But it wasn't a monster, it was watching. And then it nodded. Not to threaten, not to scare, but as if to say, you see now. The next instant it turned and vanished into the trees. The wind picked up. The whispers faded. And I understood something I hadn't before. The force wasn't broken. It was changing, or maybe it was awakening. And all these creatures, Dogman, Skinwalker, Bigfoot, they weren't random. They were guardians. Or maybe warnings, each one tied to something ancient beneath the roots, some force that was stirring again after centuries of quiet, and I was standing on the threshold. I left the forest that night with a deeper respect and a deeper fear. I still patrol Graywood. I still listen to the birds in the morning, but I carry more than a sidearm now. I carry knowledge, and every night when I hear the owls call and the wind rustle low, I know they're still out there, watching, waiting, and whatever walks after dark in Graywood walks with purpose. I've been a park ranger at Graywood National Park for over 10 years now, and I've seen the forest in every mood it can conjure. Spring warmth, autumn gold, winter's silence so still you'd swear time had stopped. But nothing prepared me for what I saw out by the North Ridge in late October. It started simple enough. I was assigned to check on a series of remote trail cameras we'd placed months back. We'd had a rise in reports of strange animal sightings, missing livestock near the perimeter, odd sounds at night, that sort of thing. Mostly black bears or moose crossing unusual paths. That's what I told myself. It was the quiet that first set me off. Even for late fall, the woods were wrong. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you start to hear your own heartbeat echo off the trees. The first camera near the split cedar grove had been torn clean off its post. Not yanked, ripped. Metal casing twisted like a soda can. I bagged the remains and moved on. The second one was worse. It had been stuffed into the hollow of a tree, lens cracked, red blinking light still struggling. But when I checked the SD card later, what I found made my stomach twist. I watched it in the warmth of the ranger station hours later, coffee in hand, boots kicked off. The clip was short, 30 seconds, shot at night. At first, nothing. Just wind in the pines, the occasional chirp of a distant owl. Then the trees started to move. Not sway, move. As if something big was pushing its way through the underbrush, coming closer. At second 17, a shape crossed the frame, massive, hunched, too smooth in motion to be a bear. Long arms, no visible snout. The thing paused right at the edge of the frame. Its shoulder nearly blocked out the lens. But the worst part? It turned to look directly at the camera, eyes glowing, expression unreadable. Then it blinked and walked out of frame. The time stop was only 2 nights ago. So like an idiot, or maybe a man too deep in the job to quit now, I went back. Alone. I set out before dawn, heading north toward the ridge where the third camera had been placed, just beyond Hollow Creek, an isolated pocket of the park, thick with pine and aspen. It's the kind of place where compasses spin and GPS signals vanish. As I got closer, I found prints in the mud, big ones, larger than any I'd seen before. Easily 18 inches long, 5 toes, no claws, human-like, but wider, heavier, deep enough to suggest a creature well over 400 pounds. I followed the trail uphill into a dense thicket. Every instinct in me screamed to turn around, but I kept going. It wasn't bravery. It was something else, obsession, maybe. I stopped when I saw it, not the creature, not at first, but its den. Built under the roots of a toppled pine, half buried in moss and leaves. The entrance was massive, ringed with bones, deer, raccoon, maybe even elk, picked clean, arranged in a strange circular pattern, like a ritual. The smell hit me next, musky, damp, like wet fur and rotting pine. Then I heard the breathing, low, rhythmic, behind me. I turned slowly. It was there, 8, maybe 9 feet tall, covered in dark auburn hair, matted in places. Its face was leathery, ancient, not ape, not man. Something in between. The eyes were dark, too human. They blinked once. I didn't move, neither did it. We just watched each other. A full minute passed, maybe more. Then it stepped forward. Not aggressive, not slow either, just curious. It raised a hand, fingers long, thick-knuckled. It reached toward me, not to strike, to touch. I backed away instinctively, and that's when I felt it. The trees around us had gone deathly still. No wind, no sound. Just the two of us locked in some ancient standoff beneath the pines. It made a sound then, low, guttural, almost mournful. And in a flash, it turned and disappeared into the forest. Not crashing, not stopping. It moved like fog, gone in seconds. I stood there for a long time after, shaking, breathing like I'd just run a marathon. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. My boots were sunk into the soft forest floor, and I couldn't bring myself to move. It had let me go. That night I didn't sleep. I kept the footage from the camera to myself. Made a report that the device had been destroyed by a bear. Nothing else, because what I saw wasn't meant for anyone else. It wasn't violent, it wasn't savage, it was aware. And for a moment, I truly believe it saw me the way I saw it. Just two creatures, out of place in their own ways, caught in a moment that neither of us fully understood. I still work the park, but I never go near Hollow Creek again. And sometimes when the mist rolls down from the ridgeline in the early hours of the morning, I think I hear something watching me from beyond the trees. Not a predator, not a ghost, just something old, something that remembers. I've spent a decade patrolling Graywood National Park. I know these woods. I know their moods, their trails, their hidden dangers. And I know when something's not right. It was mid-September, 2 weeks before the equinox, when the reports started coming in. A pair of campers had heard something walking around their tent just after midnight. Said it circled for hours, long steps, heavy breathing, but they never saw a thing, just felt it. They left before sunrise and didn't come back for their gear. I chalked it up to a black bear at first, but then came another report, this one from a hunter near Fox Ridge, who swore something followed him for a mile through the timberline. Said it never broke cover, never made a sound, but the smell was awful, like wet dog and copper. He said it wasn't a bear, said it walked, and that when he turned to look, he caught a glimpse of eyes in the trees, tall, yellow, watching him from above. I didn't believe him, not fully, but I filed the report, tagged the region as a no-camp zone for a few days. Told myself it was just nerves. Too many bad movies and not enough sleep, but then I went out there myself. Fox Ridge is remote, no cell reception, no trail cams, just steep switchbacks, dense pine, and fog that settles in the valleys like a blanket. I packed light. Just a flashlight, my sidearm, and a fresh thermos of coffee. I planned to do a perimeter check and be back before nightfall. But things went sideways around dusk. I just passed the burnt stump clearing when I heard something snap in the trees. Loud, deliberate. I froze, listened. Nothing. I kept walking. Another snap. Closer this time. Heavier. I drew my pistol. Still nothing. That's when the smell hit, sharp and acidic, like rusted iron and wet fur. My eyes watered. My stomach flipped. Then the trees went quiet. No birds. No wind. Just that feeling. That crawling tension that something was watching you, something intelligent. And then I saw it, standing just beyond the tree line, half shadowed by fog. It was tall, massive, easily 8 feet. Its limbs were too long, like they'd been stretched. Muscles rippled beneath black matted fur. The head was unmistakable, canine, but too wide. Too heavy, a snout like a wolf, teeth like daggers, ears perked, twitching, and the eyes, bright, reflective, human-like in their focus. It stood upright, chest heaving, arms slack at its sides. It watched me, and I watched it back. Then it smiled. Not a snarl, not a threat. A smile, lips peeling back slow, exposing rows of jagged yellow teeth. That was enough. I turned and ran. I didn't fire. I didn't scream. I just ran full sprint, crashing through the brush, heart in my throat. Branches tore at my arms. Rocks bit into my boots. But I didn't stop. Behind me, I heard it. Not crashing, chasing. It was fast. So fast I could feel it catching up. But it wasn't sprinting. It was stalking, letting me know it could have ended me if it wanted to. At one point, I swear, there's no more than 10 feet behind me. I felt its breath hot and heavy on the back of my neck. But just before I reached the ranger outpost clearing, it stopped. Vanished into the woods like smoke. I stumbled inside, slammed the door, and collapsed on the floor. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't even hold my gun straight. I sat there all night, listening, waiting, but it never came. The next morning, I went back to the trail, found deep prints in the dirt where I'd seen it, larger than any canine I've ever known. Not paw prints. Not exactly. They looked like a wolf had learned to walk on two legs. I didn't file the report, didn't tell the others, because I knew what they'd say. I know what I'd say if the roles were reversed. But I also know what I saw. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was real, the dogman, and it let me go. I don't know why. I don't think it was mercy. I think it was a warning. Since then I've had dreams of deep woods, of eyes glowing in the dark, of long claws tapping against bark. Sometimes I wake up and swear I smell that same coppery stench in the air. And once, just once, I found claw marks on my cabin's door. 3 deep gouges, nothing stolen, nothing broken. Just a message I still patrol Graywood, but I never go back to Fox Ridge, because I know what walks there now, and it knows me too. I'd been working Echo Ridge for close to 8 years, tucked in a lonely stretch of the Appalachian backcountry. The park had a quiet kind of beauty to it, mist-laced ravines, black spruce that bent like they were whispering secrets, and a ridge that sang when the wind blew just right. It was peaceful, solitary, just the way I liked it. They shut the park down every winter. Snow came heavy through that part of the range, and the only road in or out could ice over so bad it turned into a death trap. But this year something was off. We'd had a series of trail cams triggered without clear cause. No animals, no hikers, just movement. A shape here, a blur there. Then the power lines feeding the ranger cabin on the upper ridge got knocked out twice in 1 week. Management asked for a final inspection before the freeze locked everything down. I volunteered for the job. I didn't mind. I knew the terrain better than anyone, and I figured a few quiet days up at Echo Ridge would be a good send-off for the season. I packed light, flashlight, flare gun, a week's worth of rations, and drove up the access trail in my old Chevy. First snow had already dusted the peaks. The sky looked bruised, like it was holding back something heavier. The first 2 days were uneventful. I checked the cams, reset a few, made my rounds. Nothing strange, nothing new, but the nights were different. The wind didn't howl like it used to. It whispered. Not like voices, not at first, more like breathing. Soft and close, just outside the cabin. I'd step outside and find nothing. No tracks in the snow, not even animal prints. Just that same breathy hush, as if something had been right there and vanished. By the third night, I was sleeping in hour-long bursts. Kept waking up cold, like the temperature would dip every time I started dreaming. I remember the clock ticking, 2:14, 2:15, then gone, just black. I woke up sitting on the floor in front of the cabin door, flashlight clutched so hard my fingers ached. That's when I radioed base. No response. Not static, just silence, like the signal had never been sent. I made the decision to head back early the next morning, but when I opened the door, there were tracks. Not footprints, drags. Something or someone had been pulled through the snow, a deep, uneven trench that led from the front of the cabin into the tree line. The snow around it hadn't melted, and no signs of a struggle. just a single wide drag mark leading away. I followed it. I know that was a mistake now, but at the time, I couldn't let it go. My boots crunched quietly through the crusted powder as I followed the trail down into the hollow. The trees grew dense fast. My breath hung in front of me, thick and slow. And then I started hearing it again, that whisper. But this time it was voices. Just one at first, then more. Too many. All layered, tangled over each other like roots in the dark. "You see us now," they murmured. "You remember." I tried to radio again, still dead. I should have turned around, should have gone back, but I kept following. The trail ended in a clearing I'd never seen before, though I'd hiked these woods 100 times. At the center of the glade stood a tree, massive, gnarled, its bark twisted like something had clawed at it for decades. And hanging from the lower branches were objects, ranger gear, jackets, hats, radios, all faded and weather-worn, all tagged with names of people I hadn't heard from in years, rangers who'd gone missing. One of the jackets was mine, my old one, the one I lost in a flash flood 4 years ago. I'd never told anyone where it was swept away. I didn't have time to think about it. The forest shifted. The ground trembled, just slightly, enough to knock loose the snow from the branches above. And then the air grew so cold I couldn't breathe. Something was moving in the dark beyond the tree line. Not walking, not running, sliding, a shape, tall, humanoid but wrong, like its limbs were too long and its face was just a blur of eyes and mouths that whispered all at once. "You remember?" it said again. "You should not have come." I ran. Didn't think, just ran. I dropped my flashlight. I don't remember how long I was moving. Hours, maybe. The sun was starting to rise when I burst out onto the main trail. The radio worked again. I don't know how. I called base. They sent a snowcat up that afternoon. I told them I'd fallen and hit my head. They bought it. I left the park that night. I never went back. They closed Echo Ridge permanently after that winter. Claimed the landslide risk was too high. But I know the truth. That clearing wasn't supposed to exist. That tree wasn't supposed to be there. And I never figured out who or what it was I heard whispering my name in the dark. I was stationed at Wildemore Reserve for 5 years. It wasn't a national park, just a protected stretch of old-growth forest tucked between a string of fog-choked mountains in Oregon. Not many tourists made it out that way, and I preferred it that way. The quiet was something you learned to live with out there. No traffic, no cell reception, just the trees. And the fog, God, the fog. It rolled in without warning. You'd go to sleep under a starry sky and wake up surrounded by pale nothingness. It could hang for hours, sometimes days, wrapping the trees in silence, so complete it pressed in on you. I never minded it much until last fall. It started with a call from one of the trail cameras near Black Elk Hollow, a remote section of the southern loop that hadn't been maintained in years. The feed flagged motion at 2:17 a.m., just a single still image. A man, shirtless, barefoot, standing in the middle of the trail, staring up at the canopy. His eyes were wide, his mouth open, like he was mid-scream. Thing is, there was no record of anyone checking in at the station. No hikers out there, no vehicles on the entry logs. I hiked down myself the next morning. The fog was already thick when I reached the hollow. You couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. I kept expecting the silhouette of the man to reappear, but the trail was empty, no footprints. No sign anyone had been there at all, except for one thing, the smell, wet metal. Like blood on rusty iron, I wrote it off. Probably a glitch in the camera. Maybe someone had wandered off course from another area. Happens sometimes, but then the radio call started static bursts. Garbled voices on the ranger band. No IDs, just fragments. Don't let them in. They know your name. She's not real. Each time I tried to respond, the signal died. I replaced the batteries, changed radios. Same thing. The voices kept coming back. Then I started dreaming. Always the same fog rolling into the cabin through the cracks, filling the room like smoke. I'd wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, only to find the windows weren't fogged up at all. But the dreams left a pressure behind, like something was waiting just outside the glass. It came to a head 3 nights before the end of my shift. I was out doing a routine perimeter check near the old logging road. Fog had rolled in heavy that afternoon, thick enough that I had to mark trees with chalk to keep my bearings. I heard my name. Not in the wind, not through the radio. Right behind me, clear, confident. A voice I hadn't heard in 10 years, my sister's. She died in a car crash in 2012. I turned, flashlight trembling in my hand. Nothing there. Just fog and the skeletal shapes of pine trees looming like gravestones. I called out. Who's there? More voices now. Dozens. Whispering, sobbing, laughing, coming closer. I bolted. Didn't bother marking trees. Just ran, tearing through underbrush until I hit the access road and collapsed beside my truck. My radio clicked on 217, it whispered. Look up. I did. The fog above the trees was swirling, spinning slowly in a spiral, like a drain pulling at the sky. At the center of the vortex, something hung there. A figure, thin, elongated, limbs stretched too far, face a smooth mask with no mouth, no eyes, just hollow skin, billowing with the fog. And then, just as quick, it vanished. I left Wildermoor the next morning, packed my bags and didn't look back. They've since closed Black Elk Hollow to all foot traffic. Some internal memo about unstable terrain, mudslides, and endangered habitat. Standard cover story. But I know the truth. Something comes with the fog. And it's always 217 when it does. I transferred to Larkspur Range in late spring, a quiet assignment in the northern Cascades, mostly forest, some mountain trails, and a few old fire lookouts we kept for tradition more than function. My post was near Station 9, an aging tower that sat half-buried in moss and cloud nearly year-round. It was rarely manned, too remote, too unstable. Locals whispered that the ground beneath it was cursed. Something about a sinkhole or a fire that swallowed a whole team of rangers back in the 70s. I didn't pay the stories much mind until the nights got long. My shift covered dusk to dawn, solitary with check-ins every 2 hours over radio. I'd sit in the small cabin that served as my base, flipping through old trail maps, listening to the stove tick and settle as it cooled. I got used to the silence out there, the kind that makes you hear your own blood. But 3 weeks into the job, something changed. It began with noises coming from Station 9. At first, I thought it was the wind, low groans and creaks, like the tower was shifting. Then came the clanging, sharp, rhythmic, metal striking metal. I radioed Central. "Anyone up at 9 tonight?" I asked. Pause. Then negative. "That tower's locked. Nobody's assigned there until July." I grabbed my pack and hiked out, thinking maybe it was a bear or some dumb kid trying to film ghost stories for the internet. The climb took me just under an hour. The trail narrowed the closer I got, overgrown and slick with moss. When I reached the base of the tower, everything was silent. No wind, no animals, just cold stillness and the soft sound of creaking wood. I circled the structure. The front gate was closed. The lock rusted shut, but there were footprints in the mud, bare feet, large, deep, 6 toes. I stood there for a minute, staring at those prints, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I heard it, a slow, deliberate dragging sound coming from inside the tower. Something heavy. I backed away and radioed again. "Dispatch, there's something moving in Station 9. It's not human." Static. Then a voice I didn't recognize came through. Not Central, not anyone I knew. "Don't open the door." The voice was flat, hollow, like it wasn't made for speech. The kind of voice you feel in your stomach more than your ears. I turned and bolted back down the trail. The rest of the night was quiet. Too quiet. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that tower and those footprints, still wet in the mud. Over the next week, I started getting strange alerts on the motion cameras up near Station 9. No images. Just the alerts. Like something was moving but wouldn't show up on film. Then I found the birds, 4 crows, all lined up perfectly on the railing of my cabin porch. All dead, eyes missing, necks twisted backward. I didn't report it. How could I? Then, 2 nights ago, it came to me. I was outside the cabin at around 3:00 a.m., checking the generator. The trees were black against the mist, barely visible in the faint glow of my lantern. And then I heard it. That same dragging sound from the tower, only now it was close, too close. I turned. Just at the edge of the tree line, something tall was watching me. Its skin was gray, slick, like wet bark. Its limbs were too long, with joints that bent wrong. Its face was an oval of raw flesh with no features, just pulsing like it was breathing through its skin. It stepped forward, and then I heard the voice again. "You opened the door." I didn't. I swear I didn't, but maybe I wanted to. I don't remember running back inside, only slamming the door and locking it. I stayed up till dawn, rifle in hand, eyes on the window. Nothing came through. Nothing touched the walls. But I haven't left the cabin since. I keep hearing whispers at night, and every time I sleep, I dream of Station 9, of the tower door swinging open and something crawling out. I don't know what's out there. I just know it's watching me, waiting, and whatever it is, it used to live behind the door. Now it doesn't. I've been hiking the same trails outside Ash Hollow for years now. The old gravel path near the quarry, locals call it the back loop, has always been a favorite of mine. It winds through a patch of second-growth forest, a mix of pine and birch, with wild raspberries lining the edges in summer, and everything dead quiet by late fall. I've never been afraid out there. Not really. I carry a flashlight, a good blade, and usually a walking stick. But something changed last November, and I haven't been back since. It started simple. I was doing a solo sunset hike, clearing my head after work. It was colder than expected. My breath was fogging the air, and the light was fading fast. By the time I reached the midpoint, right where the trees start crowding the trail and the old quarry fence begins, I noticed everything had gone completely still. No birds, no wind. Even the trees felt like they were holding their breath. And then I smelled it. Rot. Not just the usual dead leaf decay. It was thick, sour, like spoiled meat left out in the sun. I stopped walking. It was coming from the brush to my left, down where the trees dipped into a shallow ravine. I hit my flashlight. Nothing, just trees, mud, bramble. Then movement. Something ducked behind a fallen log at the bottom of the dip. At first, I thought it might be a deer. Then I heard it breathe. Loud, raspy, wet, whatever it was, it exhaled like it was choking on its own lungs. I backed up a step. It stood up. It was tall, not human tall. Wrong tall. Its shoulders were hunched, bones visible under stretched skin like old leather. Its eyes, I'll never forget the way they reflected the beam of my flashlight. Not like an animal, not even like a cat. They glowed white-blue, like twin LEDs, staring straight into my skull. It didn't move at first. Then it twitched, not walked, twitched forward, like its body didn't quite know how to move right. And when it opened its mouth, the sound that came out made my knees buckle. It spoke, but not in words. It was like my own voice bouncing back at me, warped and stitched together. It said something like, "Come back." Or maybe I came back. I don't know. The voice didn't match the mouth. It didn't even open properly. I ran. I don't remember how long I ran for. I didn't stop until I saw the lights from the highway, until I was gasping against the hood of my car, tasting blood in my mouth from the cold air. When I got home, I checked the local Facebook hiking groups. I didn't post anything. I didn't want to sound insane. But I found a post buried from 2 weeks earlier. A guy claimed something had followed him on the back loop trail. He described the eyes exactly. A few days later, someone else posted about their dog going missing by the quarry. Said the leash was found torn apart, like it had been yanked by something big. I never told anyone this in person, not even my girlfriend, but I still dream about it. Sometimes I wake up and I swear I hear breathing in the hallway, slow, raspy, wet. And last night I found muddy prints on the stairs. My name's Brandon Marks. I've been with the Park Service for 18 years. Most of those years were spent in the Smokies, but in 2017, I transferred to a quieter post in northern Arizona near Black Hollow Preserve. It wasn't well known. No glossy brochures, no guided tours. Just a patch of protected land covering about 10 square miles of canyon, pine, and scrub. Locals came to fish, hike, or just vanish into the trees for a weekend. The regulars called it peaceful, but the old-timers, they warned folks not to hike it after dark. I always thought those stories were folklore. Every small town has its boogeyman. But in the fall of 2019, I stopped thinking of it as a story. It started on a Tuesday. I was covering solo night watch because Brian, our usual late shift guy, had taken time off. I'd been doing routine trail sweeps in a marked pickup. It was just past 1 o'clock a.m. when I got a radio call from dispatch. A father and daughter had failed to return from a trail called Split Ridge. That trail wasn't popular for a reason. Poorly marked, steep drop-offs, and it skirted the edge of an unregulated wilderness zone folks referred to as dead pines. I told dispatch I'd head out. The wind had picked up by the time I reached the trailhead. I threw on a headlamp, grabbed my pack and sidearm, and started walking. I remember feeling watched, but that's not unusual on solo night hikes. You tune it out. You move on. I kept moving. My headlamp caught scattered boot prints leading up the incline, then turning off trail into denser brush. I made a mental note to scold him once I found him for breaking protocol. Then I noticed something strange. 2 sets of prints going in, only 1 set coming back. The smaller ones stopped at a ridge overlooking the hollow. They just ended. No sign of a slip. No scuffs. Nothing. I started calling out, "Park Service. Anyone out here?" Nothing. I called again. This time something called back. It was a whistle, faint, like someone mimicking a bird call, but slightly off. It came from deep in the hollow. I radioed back to base to report my location and descended the ridge. Halfway down, I started noticing things. Torn fabric on a mesquite branch, a small sneaker by a root cluster. I crouched to inspect it when I heard it again, closer now. The whistle, but there was no wind. I scanned with my light and caught something. Impossible. A tall figure crouched low in the brush, maybe 30 feet away. At first I thought it was a bear, but no bear moves like that. It was standing on 2 legs. Its knees were bent backwards. Its skin or fur was thin and patchy, dark like ash. Its eyes caught my light and burned white. Then it smiled. Not a snarl, a smile. And it whistled. I raised my sidearm and backed up slowly, heart hammering. I didn't fire, I just moved. The thing didn't follow. It just watched, whistling, until the sound faded behind me. Back at the ridge, I called in a code gray, missing persons with possible predatory threat, and requested backup. The search team arrived an hour later. We found the father face down in a ravine. His neck was broken. No sign of the girl. But near the father's body was a single set of prints. Canine. But bipedal. That's when I started reading about dogmen, about skinwalkers, about things that whistle in the dark and mimic voices trying to lure you off trail. I kept most of it to myself, until a week later. It was almost midnight. I was closing the east gate when I heard footsteps behind me, but no one was there. Then I heard my own voice whisper behind me, "Come back." I turned so fast I nearly dislocated my shoulder. Nothing. Just wind pushing through the pine. Over the next few months, the calls kept coming in. Missing hikers. Torn clothing. Bones found stripped clean. No signs of scavengers. No blood trails, just emptiness. And always the same stretch of land Black Hollow. They sent new rangers. Most didn't last long. Some saw a dog on 2 legs. Others reported hearing chanting. One guy, fresh out of Flagstaff, quit after 2 nights. He said he saw a woman crawling up a tree backwards, like a spider with no bones. We lost 1 ranger. Her name was Lexi. Her last radio call came in just before sunrise. Her voice was frantic. She kept saying, "It's wearing his face. Oh God, it's wearing his face." We found her cruiser 2 days later. Doors open, lights on, her gun still in its holster. No sign of her. The worst part? A week after she vanished, another hiker reported seeing a ranger in the woods. Sighed she looked pale, like she'd been lost for days. She asked them to follow her. Said she knew a shortcut back to the trailhead. They got a bad feeling and ran. Probably saved their lives. Since then, I've seen it too. The figure. Sometimes it's tall and wolfish, hunched in the trees. Sometimes it looks like someone I know. Sometimes it's just eyes in the dark. But it always whistles. Always. I don't work there anymore. They shut the preserve down last year. Official reason? Increased predator activity and trail erosion. But we know the truth. Black Hollow isn't a preserve. It's a cage. And whatever's in there, it's still calling out. If you ever find yourself on a trail after dark and you hear a whistle where there shouldn't be one, don't look. Don't answer. Just run. My name's Dylan Grant, Senior Ranger with the Northern District of Foxwater Creek Reserve. I've been on the job 12 years. Seen floods, fires, poachers, meth labs and trailers, the whole backwoods circus. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened near Trail 6C last fall. Foxwater's an old preserve. Half federal land, half tribal borderland, tucked against the edge of the Mescalero Apache territory in New Mexico. Beautiful country, sharp ridge lines, deep creek beds, and miles of pine wilderness. But it's quiet out there, too quiet sometimes. And when you spend enough time patrolling those woods, you start to feel like you're not alone, even when the radio's dead and no one's called in for hours. The locals won't camp near Trail 6C, not even the off-grid types. They call it dead stringer, say the animals vanish when the sun goes down, and the trees creak like they're breathing. We were never supposed to talk about it officially, but every ranger who stuck around long enough had a 6C story. Mine didn't come until late October. It was just after a rainstorm and the fog was thick enough to carve. I was doing solo inspection runs near the base of the ridge, making sure the creek crossings hadn't been wiped out. Around 9:45 p.m., dispatch radioed in a call from a local hiker. A woman said she'd gotten lost and seen something watching her from the trees. Said it spoke to her in her own voice. I asked if she was still on the line, and dispatch said no, just static now. Location pinged her last known signal from near Dead Stringer's lower fork. Lucky me. I parked the truck where the service road met the trailhead. The rain had turned the dirt to sludge. I shouldered my pack, switched on the radio, and started hiking. The woods were soaked in silence. Not a single cricket. Even the frogs had shut up. Half an hour in, I found her tracks. muddy boot prints moving erratically, veering off trail and back again like she was running in circles. Then I found the other ones, larger, barefoot, deeper prints, long strides, toes splayed wide like claws. They followed her. I called out. No answer, just a steady hush of dripping branches. I picked up her trail again near the creek bend. There was something on the ground, a flannel shirt, soaked in mud and torn down the center. I bent to check for blood. There wasn't any, none at all, not a drop. That's when I heard it. My own voice. Hey, over here, please hurry. It was coming from deep in the trees. Not panicked, not scared. Too calm. I froze. That wasn't her. That wasn't me. I raised the radio to call in backup, but the channel buzzed, then cut to static. Then the air changed. You ever feel the woods shift around you like you're inside a house that's breathing? That's what it felt like. The fog pulled tighter, the temperature dropped, and the smell of copper filled the air. And then I saw it, across the creek. It stood half-hidden behind a split pine, tall and thin, its skin sagging like a dried hide, wrapped too tight around something it wasn't made for. It wore her face. I mean that literally. Her face was stretched over its head like a mask, eyes black and empty, mouth twitching, but not quite smiling. I didn't think. I just moved. I took off down the bank, splashing through the creek, hoping to throw it off. The fog closed in, and I swear I could hear it behind me. Footsteps that sounded wrong, uneven, like something was testing how to walk. I found the old fire tower and ran up the stairs 2 at a time, slammed the door behind me, and braced it shut. Inside I found the girl's pack, torn open, phone inside, still recording. I hit play. Her voice came through, panting, terrified. It's not a person, it's wearing someone. It followed me, but it didn't blink. Please, please, I think it's pretending to be me. Then I heard a second voice, also hers. Come back. Let's go together. The file ended. I stayed in that tower until dawn, gripping my rifle and praying I wouldn't hear footsteps on the stairs. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. And when morning finally broke, the fog was gone, and so was the thing. We never found her. Search teams came through with dogs and drones, and we never found so much as a bone. But 2 weeks later, a different ranger filed a report. Said a woman approached him near the trailhead, asking for help. Sighed she was lost, but didn't blink once the entire conversation. Her mouth barely moved when she spoke. He said something felt off. He turned to radio it in. When he turned back, she was gone, just gone. Now we have an unspoken rule. If you're on patrol near 6C and you hear a voice in the woods, even if it sounds like someone you know, even if it sounds like yourself, don't answer. Don't follow. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't bleed. It doesn't need to run. It just waits. My name is Elijah Redmoon. I've been a seasonal backcountry ranger at Bitterroot National Forest for just over 5 years. Most of my patrols keep to the western side of the range, near the border with Idaho mountain lion territory. Grizzlies too, though you rarely see them if you know how to walk the land. My family's been walking this land a long time. My grandfather, James Redmoon, was Shoshone-Bannock. Taught me how to read a sky long before I ever touched a compass. How to feel the mood of the forest by the way the birds fall silent, the way the wind changes directions, the way the trees listen. He was a tribal fire watcher in the 70s, died in his cabin under circumstances the official report called accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. But my father never believed that. Said something followed him home from a ridge he wasn't supposed to be on. I used to think it was just a story to scare me. Until last fall. It started on my 6th solo patrol of the season. I was sent up toward the Blackroot Pines, a sector of the forest not officially closed, but we quietly advise people not to go there. It's a dense stretch past Lupine Lake, where the trees grow so close together they blot out the sky. Old-growth forest that feels older than time itself. The locals call it Whisper Hollow. 3 hikers had gone missing there in the past 8 months. All found eventually, all alive, but they came back changed. One wouldn't speak at all. One wouldn't stop screaming. And the last kept whispering that his brother wouldn't stop watching him from the trees. He didn't have a brother. I was sent to investigate signs of illegal camping. Smoke trails had been spotted on satellite footage. No obvious sign of a fire, just trails of thin ash curling up from the canopy like breath. I took my pack, my .45, and the small red pouch my grandfather gave me just before he died. They don't take kindly to being looked at, he told me. And never speak their names. They're not myths. They're predators. Just old ones. I hiked out on a Thursday. It took me a day and a half to reach the hollow. The forest changed around the 4th mile. No bird song, no underbrush, just pine and shadow. The ground was soft, like walking on soaked moss, even though it hadn't rained in days. I found the campsite by dusk, or what was left of it. 3 tents torn open. Not shredded, but cut. Neatly, like with a scalpel. Fire pit cold. Cans of food still sealed. Sleeping bags zipped but empty. But no blood. No sign of a struggle. I called it in, but static crackled on the radio. I could hear dispatch faintly, then nothing. That night, something circled my camp. I heard it just after midnight. Heavy footfalls, but wrong. Inconsistent. Sometimes upright, sometimes quadrupedal. And the breathing, like an old man trying to sob quietly, but not quite human. I stayed in my tent, clutching the pouch. It whispered my name. Elijah, Elijah, come out. You left me there. The voice was my grandfather's. I didn't move, didn't speak. When dawn came, I found no tracks, but hanging from a branch above my fire pit was my grandfather's old ranger badge. Rusted, bent. He'd been dead 12 years. I hiked deeper the next day. Something compelled me, something between duty and dread. About a mile past the ruins, I found a tree. Not just any tree. A pine split by lightning decades ago, blackened down the middle like a wound. Its bark was covered in symbols carved so deep they bled sap. At its base, a circle of stones. Inside it, teeth. human and animal, mixed, arranged carefully. I stepped into the circle, and the forest blinked, not literally, but that's how it felt. The air changed. My breath steamed even though the temperature hadn't dropped. The wind died, and something watched me, not from the trees. From behind my eyes, I blacked out. When I woke, I was 10 feet from the circle. My boots were missing, my pack gone, my feet scraped and bleeding. On my chest, smeared in ash, was a symbol I recognized from my grandfather's old field journal, a binding mark. He'd drawn it only once, next to a note. If it returns, this is the last resort. I stumbled barefoot through the forest for hours. The woods no longer followed normal geography. I'd looped the same hollow 3 times without meaning to. Each time something watched from the corner of my vision, shifting shapes, always just out of sight. It called to me again that night. My father's voice. "Son, please, I'm cold. Let me in. I won't ask again." I answered, "I know what you are. You can't come in." The voice changed, grew deep, wrong. "Then you die alone, Red Moon." I spent the 3rd night in a hollow beneath a fallen cedar, drew protection symbols in blood from my feet, burned the contents of the pouch my grandfather gave me. The smoke shimmered strange colors. The whispers stopped. I slept, and I dreamt. In the dream, I was in the old cabin, my grandfather's, but the walls pulsed like lungs. He stood in the corner, half shadow, face flickering. "It wants you because of me," he said. "What is it? What we tried to lock away? Why me?" He touched my chest, where the binding symbol had been drawn. "Because you can walk both sides, and it can't stand the ones who walk the border." I woke with the knowledge, the name, not to speak, but to cut. I carved the sigil into a stone with my last piece of flint and buried it in the circle. The forest screamed. Not sound, not vibration, feeling. Like 1,000 angry eyes blinking shut. The path out reappeared. My boots, pack, and rifle waited for me at the trailhead. When I got back, I burned my uniform, transferred to the northern station, never spoke of it again. Until now, because something moved through my cabin last night. Didn't take anything, didn't break in, just left a stone on my pillow, the same one I buried, the mark carved deeper than before. I am Elijah Red Moon, and I am not done running. My name is Cole Martinez. I've worked wildlands for nearly 2 decades, started with the U.S. Forest Service in New Mexico, bounced around Arizona and Nevada, then landed a ranger position at Lassen Volcanic National Park in Northern California 3 years ago. I've seen wildfire turn canyons into ovens and rivers to steam. I've seen whole herds of deer charge blind through flame. Nothing surprises me anymore. That's what I used to think. Lassen is different. The land here breathes. Locals call it Old Earth, like it's not just geologically active, but alive in a way that makes people uncomfortable if they sit with it too long. They say the fumaroles whisper when no one's around, that the boiling mud sings, that the forest changes shape. I used to laugh at that. Now I keep a jar of blessed salt in my cabin, next to the fire poker. The thing that changed it for me happened during last year's summer burn season. A lightning storm ignited a blaze in the Hat Creek Rim area. Not massive, but unpredictable. Winds kept shifting, the fire line curling back on itself like a snake with nowhere to go. I was one of 5 assigned to night perimeter duty. Spotters and mop-up crew. Walk the ridge, keep an eye on flare-ups, make sure nothing jumped the line. Standard stuff. It was 2:13 a.m. when I saw something move against the wind. That's what struck me. Everything was blowing east, smoke rising in long gusts, but there, just beyond the brush line, something moved west. It wasn't smoke, not wind-blown ash. It had form. I radioed base. No response. Static. I started walking toward it, thinking maybe a deer had wandered too close to the perimeter. That's when I saw the eye shine. Low to the ground, not animal bright, more like burning coals. Red, but not lit, reflecting something that wasn't there. Then it stood up. I'm 6'2". This thing dwarfed me, 7 foot easy. Skinny in a wrong way. Too long in the arms, too narrow in the torso. It had no fur, just pale skin that shimmered like it was wet. The face, God, I wish I could describe the face, but my memory blurs at the edges every time I try. Like my brain refuses to file the details. It stepped toward me. Not fast, like it didn't need to hurry, and the forest went silent. No wind, no crackle of flame. Even the fire behind me stilled, like the flames didn't want to draw attention. I backed up slowly. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I just whispered one word, no. It stopped, then smiled, not in the mouth. In the air around it, like the idea of smiling took shape in the smoke, I blinked. It was gone. The fire snapped back into motion behind me. The wind returned, and I heard someone on the radio finally, "Cole, come in." "Status?" I lied. "All quiet on the western edge." But I couldn't stop shaking. The next night I set up trail cams, planted motion sensors. Nothing came back, not even elk. Like that entire quarter-mile stretch had become radioactive. 3 nights later, another ranger, Amy Kwan, reported strange lights flickering in the tree line. She described a tall figure with red eyes. I pretended not to know what she meant. By the end of the week, 3 members of our team had gone home early. One claimed he couldn't sleep. Said something whispered his name from outside the tent. Another kept waking up with bloody palms from digging into the floor of her cabin in her sleep. I started researching native legends, local disappearances, old fire records. There's a pattern. Every 7 to 10 years, when a fire starts in that specific region of Lassen, someone sees it. They never agree on the description. Sometimes it walks. Sometimes it slithers. Sometimes it floats. Always the eyes. Always the wrongness. I found a journal from 1978, written by a ranger named Ellis Boone. Said he saw something during the Reading fire. Said it fed on the flames. He disappeared 3 days later. His truck was found still running, door wide open. No tracks, no sign of struggle. I still patrol, still do my job, but I keep my fire line tight. I don't respond to movement in the trees, and when I hear my name whispered through the smoke, I don't answer, because I've learned something those stories never mention. It's not just drawn to fire, it remembers you. My name is Mason Klein. I've been with the U.S. Forest Service for 11 years, most of them spent patrolling the vast, high-altitude expanses of Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. Before that, I was a wildlife biologist, and even before that, just a kid who grew up hiking these trails with my old man. I've seen mountain lions up close, rescued lost kids, and been in wildfire zones where the air turns orange and every breath tastes like the end. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened in the winter of 2022. The incident never made the news. That's how these things usually go. Just a paragraph in a ranger incident log, maybe a missing person report that quietly goes cold. But I remember every second of it. It started with a simple assignment. A seasoned solo hiker named Thomas Rayburn had failed to check out of his backcountry permit. He'd planned a 5-day trek through one of the lesser-used zones along the Ute Trail, a part of the park not visited much in winter. Too remote, too difficult, and according to some of the local guides, too strange. That last part always made me roll my eyes. Every region has its campfire legends. Shadowy creatures, lights in the woods, banshee screams in the distance. Usually coyotes or echoes doing weird things with sound. I'd seen some weird shit in my years, sure, but I had explanations for all of it. Until that week. Rayburn had GPS pinged from his last known spot, a ranger cabin deep in the backcountry, not far from a ridgeline we called Devil's Spine, old name. Supposedly, it was cursed. Native guides wouldn't even walk near it. Me? I just thought it was the way the wind came through the rocks. Sounded like whispering if you weren't used to it. Anyway, Rayburn had logged entry at the cabin. After that, nothing. No return, no messages. Weather was turning bad, and the higher ridges were getting dangerous, so I packed up and snowshoed in. 12 miles in, the trail changed. Animal tracks disappeared. Birds too. It's subtle, but you start to notice it after years on the job, the absence of things that should be there. No movement, no sound, just the crunch of snow under your feet and your breath fogging in the air. By the time I reached the old cabin, the sky had gone a pale gray. The kind of cold that creeps under your jacket and stays there. The cabin was dark. No smoke from the chimney. No footprints leading out, but there was one set leading in. Rayburn's, probably. I knocked. Nothing. Pushed the door open. Inside was wrong. Everything looked normal at first. Stove cold. Pack on the cot. One boot off, the other half on, like he'd sat down to rest and never finished. But the feeling in the air, it was heavy. Pressurized, almost. Like the moment before a lightning strike. I called out, no answer. The only thing I found was his journal, sitting on the desk beside a half-melted candle. I flipped it open. Day 3. Heard something walking the ridge last night. Thought it was a moose, but it walked too quiet. Day 4. Woke to knocking, not on the door, on the wall. Don't know how to explain that. Day 5, I saw it. The next page was torn. Not ripped, torn, as in with clawed fingers. That's when I noticed the walls, scratches, long ones, some deep enough to flake the logs. I backed out of the cabin and radioed HQ. No signal. Of course, I decided to wait a few hours. If Rayborn came back, I'd hike out with him. If not, I'd report it in person. That night was when the real horror started. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate. I sat up in my sleeping bag, hand already on the flare gun beside me. No one knocks on a ranger cabin at that hour unless something's gone terribly wrong. But there was no knock, just humming. A low, vibrating hum. It wasn't a voice. It was like the cabin itself was resonating, like the wood was remembering something terrible. Then the footsteps moved to the roof. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it upward. Nothing. But I could hear it moving above me, slow and heavy. Then came a single word, whispered from just outside the door. Mason. I froze. No one knew I was here. No one but the dispatcher, and I hadn't spoken to her in hours. Mason, it's me. Let me in. It was my brother's voice. My brother died in 2019. He fell from a climbing route in Glacier. I was the one who found the body. I didn't move. I just sat there, heart pounding, as something started scraping at the door. Not knocking, scraping. Then it stopped, just stopped, and I sat there until the sun came up. When I finally opened that door, I saw the snow had been disturbed. Something had circled the cabin 4 times, then vanished back into the woods. I followed the tracks. They led about 40 yards before disappearing mid-stride. That's not normal, not for any animal. That was 3 years ago. Rayburn was never found. No body, no gear, nothing. He was listed as presumed deceased due to weather exposure. But I know better. I saw something that night. Not clearly. Not in the open, but in the trees. Something tall, wrong-shaped, watching me. And the whispering never really stopped. Sometimes, even now, I'll be out on patrol and catch something moving just beyond the tree line, just for a second. Or I'll hear someone call my name, my brother's voice, always. There are places in these woods where the rules bend, where the veil thins. Call it what you want, spirit world, other dimension, I don't pretend to know. But I do know this. The old legends, the ones we laughed off, they're warnings, and the things they warned us about, they're still here, still watching, still waiting. They assigned me to the Humboldt-Toyab after a decade working parks back east. Said I had the experience for remote terrain, and I guess I did. But no amount of experience prepares you for what doesn't make sense. My name's Elsie Maddox. Been a ranger since I was 22, stationed in Appalachia for most of my early years. When I transferred to Nevada, I thought the hardest part would be the dryness. No more humid forests, no more rainfall on leaves like an old lullaby. What I got instead was 1,000 miles of silence that felt alive. They stationed me near a section of forest the old-timers still call hollow pines. I asked why. My supervisor, John Fellows, shrugged and muttered something about odd compass readings and too many lost hikers. He was a practical man, not one for folklore, but I could tell he was holding something back. The ranger station itself was a prefab shack 10 miles off the nearest road. Solar power, spotty radio, no cell signal. I spent my first week getting the lay of the land, tall ponderosa pines, shale ridges, and a winding creek that dried up around mid-July. Beautiful country, isolated. It started with the crows. You hear a lot of birds out here, but these weren't like any I'd known. They didn't call, they croaked, low and harsh, like something mimicking the sound without getting it quite right. They gathered in the pines, always just a few at first, then 20, then more. I'd find them staring down at the station, silent. If I stepped outside, they'd scatter like normal birds, but they always came back. A few nights in, I woke up to what I thought was my name. Not a dream, it was outside, clear as anything, Elsie. I grabbed my flashlight and my service pistol, stepped out into the dry night. The moon was high, casting silver across the treetops, but the clearing in front of the cabin was empty. The wind barely moved. I radioed John the next morning, told him someone might be messing around. His voice crackled through the static. Keep a log, don't chase shadows. You're not the first to hear your name out there. It got worse after that. 3 days later, I found a boot near the creek, just one, torn at the ankle, stained dark. There was no report of missing hikers. The closest trailhead was 20 miles out. I bagged it, tagged it, and followed the prints leading away from it. Bare footprints, human-shaped, but wrong. The toes were longer than they should have been, almost jointed. They led me to a cave I hadn't seen before. Wasn't marked on any map. The entrance was small, tucked beneath a granite shelf. I didn't go in. Something about it set every hair on my neck upright. The trees around it grew in crooked spirals like they were reaching for something underground. That night I heard the voice again. Not just my name, words this time. It's so cold here, Elsie. It was my sister's voice. She's been dead 5 years. Hit and run. The bastard never stopped. My legs gave out and I just sat on the floor of the station, the radio silent, the night pressing in from all sides. The forest knows. I wrote that in my log. I don't remember doing it. Just found the sentence over and over again in my own handwriting, like I was trying to remind myself. Then came the knocking, first on the door, then the walls, then the roof. Always rhythmic, never frantic. It wasn't an animal. It sounded like a person testing the boundaries. I called it in. John said he'd drive up, check on things personally. Said he'd be there by noon the next day. He never made it. The trail cam I set up half a mile out caught something at 3:13 a.m., a shape, tall, thin, not quite human. It walked on 2 legs but dropped to all 4s without changing speed. I watched the footage 10 times before the batteries drained while still plugged in. That morning, I found John's truck 10 miles from the station, doors wide open, radio ripped out, windshield cracked from the inside. There was a claw mark on the driver's seat, 3 talons, deep. I've stayed another 5 days since, barricaded the doors, marked the windows with salt and ash. I carved symbols I don't remember learning into the walls. And now, as I write this, the voice is back. Elsie. Only this time it's not trying to sound like my sister. It's trying to sound like me. Tomorrow, I'm hiking out. I have 1 flare, 1 satellite phone, and a route marked through the driest, flattest ground I can find. If I don't make it out and someone finds this log, do not go to Hollow Pines. Do not answer the voice. Whatever walks out of the trees wearing your voice is not you. Not anymore. My name is Ranger Caleb Dunn, and for the past 7 years I've been stationed at Black Hollow State Preserve, a dense stretch of forest land in northern Washington that barely shows up on most maps. The preserve sits on the edge of old logging country, nestled between jagged peaks and long-forgotten homesteads, the kind of place locals whisper about, but never visit unless they're drunk or dare each other into it. Black Hollow got its name from the strange way the pine needles block out the light. Even at high noon, it feels like twilight under the canopy, cool, damp, and watchful. I transferred here after burning out at a bigger national park downstate. I thought the solitude would be healing. That was a mistake. The outpost they assigned me is little more than a 2-room log cabin tucked into the ridge above Hollow Lake. There's no cell service, no reliable internet, and during the winter months, the only contact I have with the outside world is a cranky radio that only works if the sky is clear and the antenna isn't frozen over. I didn't mind the isolation at first. In fact, I welcomed it. But that was before the crying started. It began in late September. The temperature dropped overnight, and frost crept into the corners of the windows. Around 2:13 a.m., I woke up to what I thought was a woman sobbing just outside my window. It wasn't loud, not screaming, not distressed, just quiet, broken weeping. The kind of sound that crawls into your bones. I got dressed, grabbed my flashlight and sidearm, and stepped out onto the porch, expecting to find some lost hiker or drunk teenager from one of the towns below. But there was no one there, just the wind threading through the pines. I made a slow circle around the cabin. No footprints in the frost, no signs of disturbance. And yet the air felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I chalked it up to a dream. Happens out here. Your mind starts to fray a little when all you've got to talk to is the wind and the ravens. But the crying came again the next night. And the night after that, always around 2:13 a.m., always just beyond the edge of the tree line. Always the same tone, quiet, restrained, like someone trying not to be heard. I reported it to my supervisor, who didn't seem surprised. "Yeah," she said over the radio, "Black Hollow's got its moods. You're not the first ranger to mention it. Just don't go chasing it." Chasing it? The phrasing stuck with me. I didn't go out that night, or the night after. I started sleeping with earplugs, even though they didn't fully block the sound. It's strange after a while, but crying started to feel personal, like it was for me, directed at me. And when I didn't respond, it changed. By the end of the week, it wasn't just sobbing anymore. It started whispering my name, Caleb ... soft, drawn out, like it was being dragged through a throat full of gravel. "Caleb, come down to the lake." On the 7th night, I cracked. I told myself I needed to debunk it. Maybe a prank, maybe some strange acoustics in the valley, something logical. I grabbed my jacket, a flare, my sidearm, and hiked down the trail toward Hollow Lake. The further I walked, the quieter everything became. No insects, no birds, not even the wind, just silence. And then, halfway down the trail, I found the boot print. One, single, barefoot, human. Pressed into the frost, still fresh, deep, leading off the path and into the dense thicket of trees to the east, the place we tell hikers to avoid, a place that doesn't show up on the trail maps. Locals call it the Crying Pines. I radioed in, but the signal was garbage, just static. I hesitated. I should have turned back. But something in me, curiosity, ego, maybe something else, pushed me forward. I followed the prints into the trees. About 30 yards in, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. I swear I saw my breath frost in the beam of my flashlight. That's when I saw her, standing between two trees, back to me, wearing a pale gray nightgown soaked at the hem, long black hair down past her waist, barefoot, sobbing. I called out. No response. I stepped closer. She stopped crying. Then she turned. Her eyes were hollow, not empty, hollow, as if they had been scooped out and something else was peering through the holes. Her mouth opened far too wide, and the sound that came out wasn't human. It was layered, like multiple voices, men, women, children, all crying, screaming, begging, laughing, a chorus of pain compressed into a single guttural shriek. I ran, branches tore at my jacket. Something chased me, fast and low and snarling. I didn't stop until I reached the edge of the trail again. When I looked back, there was nothing there, just the wind. I filed an incident report the next morning. I didn't get a response. 3 days later, another ranger, Dave, one of the only others assigned within 50 miles, showed up at my door looking pale. You hear it too? He asked. I nodded. He hadn't seen her, but he'd heard the crying, followed the voice, found a clearing with bones hanging from the trees. Femurs and jawbones and vertebrae all strung up like ornaments. He'd left and never gone back. We started comparing notes. Turns out sightings in the Crying Pines go back decades. Rangers who quit suddenly, hikers who disappear without a trace, locals who whisper about the mourner, an old name. A thing that mimics grief to lure you in. But it's not just a spirit. Something's feeding it. We found a journal half buried near the lake, belonging to a missing hiker named Harper Fells. Her last entry read, I know she's not real, but when she talks in Mom's voice, it's hard not to follow. It wants to be mourned, and it wants you to mourn with it. I think if I go, maybe it will stop. Harper's body was never recovered. I put in a transfer request last month. It hasn't been approved. Budget's too tight, I'm told. No replacement rangers available. Dave left without a word, packed up in the night and vanished. I haven't heard from him since, so it's just me now. And every night at 2:13 a.m., she cries. But lately, it's been closer. Last night, the voice came from under the floorboards. If this is the last entry I ever write, let it be this. Don't follow the sound. Don't let her mourn you. And for the love of God, stay out of the Crying Pines. My name is Reuben Wolf. I'm a federal ranger assigned to Wrangell St. Elias National Park. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Most tourists fly into Anchorage, maybe do Denali. But Wrangell? This place is for ghosts, glaciers, and men who want to disappear, which suited me just fine. After 15 years in the Air Force and a dishonorable discharge I don't talk about, I wanted out. My record made private sector work tough. The Park Service didn't ask questions. They needed bodies willing to patrol 10 million acres of wilderness with nothing but a pack, a rifle, and a radio that only works when the sky's in a good mood. I said yes. I'd been on the job just under a year when I got sent to monitor a remote area east of the Nebesna Glacier. A hiker had reported strange structures near the tree line, wood twisted into archways, stone stacked in spirals. That wasn't uncommon. The old Athabascan legends talked about offerings to forest spirits. More recently, a few homesteaders got into cryptic backwoods art. Still, protocol said check it out. I loaded my snow machine, packed 3 days' rations, and headed into the wild. The snow was deeper than expected. By the time I reached the edge of the glacier, the wind had picked up and visibility dropped. I made camp in a thicket of black spruce. I always pick a spot near trees. They cut the wind, and I don't sleep well under open sky. That night I heard it. At first I thought it was wind, but it wasn't moving through the trees, right? It was too rhythmic, heavy, like footsteps in snow, slow, deliberate. Then the scream. Not human, not wolf. A howl that started low and stretched so high it went silent. The kind that fills your chest with ice. I didn't sleep, just lay in my bag, rifle in hand, breath fogging the inside of my tent. By morning the wind had died, and there were prints, huge, easily 18 inches long, wide, toes, 5 of them, no claw marks. The gait was long, heavy, and deliberate. Whatever made them had walked around my tent, not through camp, not randomly, around, like it was studying me. I photographed the tracks, packed up fast, and followed them. They led into the glacier foothills, through deep drifts, over frozen rivers. I tracked it for half a day until the sun dipped low behind the peaks. That's when I saw it. Across a narrow ravine, standing on the edge of a cliff, still, watching me. It was massive, 7, maybe 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that shimmered where the low sun hit it. Broad shoulders, long arms that hung nearly to its knees. But the eyes are what got me. They weren't wild. They weren't animal. They were aware. We stared at each other. I don't know how long. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees without a sound. I stood there for minutes, heart pounding, mouth dry. My training said follow. My instincts said don't. I followed. The tracks led to a narrow cave, half covered in snow and moss. The entrance too low for something that size, yet the tracks went straight in. I radioed the outpost. Static. I stepped inside. Dark, cold, tight. The tunnel sloped downward. I flicked on my headlamp, rifle shouldered. 10 feet in, the walls widened. Became smooth, worked even, like stone polished by hands. That's when I found the bones. Animal, mostly. Elk, goat. Some arranged in circles. Some hung from the ceiling by twine or sinew. But one set smaller, shaped like a child, was laid in a bed of moss and feathers. A shrine. Behind me, snow shifted. I turned fast, but the entrance was still empty. I backed out slowly, rifle ready. Just before I cleared the mouth of the cave, I heard it again. Breathing. Behind me, I spun, but the tunnel was empty. Nothing, just the sound of dripping meltwater and my own heartbeat. I got out fast. The sun was gone. The woods were silent. I started back toward my machine, only to find it overturned. Not wrecked, moved, like someone had picked it up and rolled it onto its side. There were no new prints. Just mine. I walked the 15 miles back to base. No sleep. No stopping. Just the wind at my back and the sense of something watching from the trees. I filed the report as inconclusive wildlife activity. 2 weeks later, a search and rescue team found a missing trapper 10 miles from that cave. Half frozen, raving, said a monster had spoken to him in dreams. Told him to leave the land, that the ice belonged to them. They sedated him, airlifted him to Anchorage. I never learned his name, but a week after that I found a small leather pouch on the steps of the ranger cabin. Inside was a carving, a figure, tall, hair-covered, holding a skull in one hand and a tree in the other. At the base were letters burned into the wood. Wolf. I still have it. I keep it locked away, and I haven't gone back to that ridge, because some things don't want to be found, and some things let you leave so you can warn the others. My name is Calvin Ridge. I work as a seasonal ranger in Glacier National Park, Montana. It's not a bad gig if you don't mind long hikes, cold mornings, and being so deep in the back country that your only company is the wind and the sound of shifting ice. I'd been assigned to the Bowman Lake sector that fall. Most of the tourists had cleared out for the season, and winter was teasing the edges of the mountains. I was due to hike the Quartz Ridge Trail, check for trail damage, and monitor wildlife activity before the snow locked the area down for good. I packed light, just my rifle, a field journal, freeze-dried meals, and a canvas tent. 2 nights out, 3 days. Standard route. Nothing was standard. It started on day 1. By noon, I'd already noticed the odd silence, the kind that wraps around you like cotton, muffling your footsteps, your breath. Even the birds were quiet. A mile north of the ridgeline, I found the first one, a tree, snapped at the midpoint, 10 feet up, not fallen, broken, twisted, fresh too, sap still leaking down the trunk. I thought maybe wind damage until I found another, and another. Each one angled differently, like markers. That night, camped beside the river, I caught a scent on the wind, musky, damp, like wet dog fur and old soil. My first thought was bear. Then came the stone. Not a slide, not random. One single rock, smooth and heavy, tossed into the river from the other bank. The splash echoed through the trees. I froze, waited. Nothing, just silence, then another, smaller this time. Tossed closer. I stood, rifle ready, scanning the shoreline. That's when I saw it. A silhouette. Tall, too tall. Shoulders broad as a grizzly's. No light behind it, just the absence of it, like the forest peeled away around it. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. I didn't sleep that night. At first light, I packed and moved south, off my designated route. I told myself it was to document fallen logs near the creek bed, but really I didn't want to pass that stretch of river again. By mid-afternoon, I'd found something else. Tracks, deep impressions in the soil, toes visible, no claw marks, 5 toes. Human-like, but far too wide, far too long. The stride length was impossible. I followed them. They led to a clearing where the pine gave way to low brush and a scatter of stones. In the middle was a structure, not natural, branches woven together into an arch that bent low over a mound of rocks and moss. Bones arranged around the edges, not fresh but placed, deliberate. That was when I realized I wasn't alone. The forest around me had gone still, the kind of stillness I'd only heard once before right before an avalanche. A sound cut through it. Not a roar, not a howl. A hum, low, deep, vibrating in my chest. I turned slowly. There it was, closer this time, standing near the tree line. Hair dark and matted, arms down by its sides. Eyes, not glowing, not flashing, just watching. It made no move. Neither did I. We stood that way for a long time, just two creatures trying to understand each other. Then it turned, walked back into the trees, gone. I didn't report it. Who would believe me? Back at the ranger station, I wrote it up as an undocumented predator observation. Signs of large, unidentified fauna, possibly bipedal. Recommend further wildlife tracking in spring. A week later, another ranger found a similar structure near Hidden Meadow, and 2 weeks after that, a backpacker reported a figure watching them from the woods near Lake McDonald. None of us talk about it openly, but the ones who've seen it, we know, we feel it in the trees, in the silence, in the way the rocks fall just once across the river. Something's out there, something older than our names for this place, and it watches from the pines. My name is Isaac Blacktail. I've been a backcountry ranger at Zion National Park for 6 years. Most people think of Zion and picture the main canyon, massive red cliffs, glossy postcards, and tightly packed tourists gasping at Angel's Landing. But the park has a different side. Out past Kolob Terrace, where the trail signs fade and the sandstone gives way to ancient pine and hidden slot canyons, Zion becomes something else entirely, something older, wilder. That's where I work. I was raised Dean, half Navajo through my mother. My grandfather taught me about the land, how to walk it with respect, how to read the sky, and which stories were told quietly, so they didn't hear you speaking about them. I didn't believe the stories until the fall of 2021. I was assigned to investigate a string of reports from hikers near a section called Red Hollow, a dead-end box canyon with no official trail access. People had been hearing voices, seeing figures watching from the ridge lines. One couple claimed something followed them back to their car. They said it looked like a man but walked wrong, like its bones didn't fit together right. I figured it was a mountain lion, or maybe a prankster in a ghillie suit. The internet breeds weirdos. Still, I went prepared. I brought my pack, a radio, a GPS, and my grandfather's old leather pouch, filled with corn pollen and a small carved fetish of white stone. He gave it to me after my first solo patrol. Told me it would keep things away. What things? I asked him. The kind that wear faces that aren't theirs? I laughed then. I didn't laugh when I got to Red Hollow. The air was wrong. Still, heavy. Even the ravens stayed away. I found the first sign at the canyon mouth. An animal skull mounted on a branch. Goat, I think. Hollowed out and etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Ash scattered at its base. Deeper in, I found more. Stones stacked in spirals. Feathers tied to trees. Scratches in the canyon walls. But no footprints. None. Then I heard my name. Isaac, just once, soft. Behind me, I spun. Nothing there. I told myself it was wind curling through the rocks. I hiked to the far end of the hollow. That's where I found the camp. Old, abandoned. Half a tent shredded by wind or claws. A rusted propane burner. A sleeping bag zipped up tight. Inside the bag was a journal. The last entry read, "It wears my brother's face now. Says things only he would know. I tried to run, but it found me. It always finds you when you speak its name. That's when I smelled it. Rot. Meat. The scent of something long dead, carried on the breeze. I turned slowly and saw it, at the ridge above. It looked like a man, my height, thin, naked. But the skin was stretched too tight, like it had been pulled over the shape of something else. Its arms were too long, fingers too thin, its mouth hung open, and its eyes were mine. I ran. It followed, not fast, not loud, just steady. I didn't look back, not even when it called to me again. Isaac, it's okay now. I forgive you. It used my grandfather's voice that time. I kept running. When I reached the trailhead, I saw claw marks on my truck, 3 deep gouges in the driver's side door. The passenger window was open. Inside, resting on the dash, was the white stone fetish from my pouch. I hadn't dropped it. I never went back to Red Hollow. I filed my report. Ranger activity inconclusive. No further action required. A week later, a pair of hikers went missing near that canyon. Their bodies were never found, but another ranger found their boots, placed side by side at the edge of the trail, and a voice on his radio whispered, "Isaac." He swears he never said my name. But I don't doubt him, because I still hear it too, late at night, in dreams, in voices that wear my blood. They never stop calling, and they know the way back. My name is Travis Boone. I've been a ranger in Great Smoky Mountains National Park for nearly 8 years, most of that time stationed out near Cades Cove. People think it's one of the most peaceful places in the world. Rolling fields, misty ridgelines, the occasional black bear drifting through the grass at dawn. But I know better. The park has a weight to it. Not just the kind that comes from age, but something else, like the trees are remembering things they don't want to share. I started noticing it during my 5th year. Early November. The tourists were gone, the air was cold, and the fog didn't lift until mid-morning. I was doing a solo check along Rich Mountain Loop, hiking up past the old cabin sites when I caught a smell on the wind. It wasn't rot, not exactly. More like wet fur and copper, blood. At first, I thought it was a wounded animal. Then I found the deer, or what was left of it. Ribs snapped open like a book. Spine bent backwards. No sign of a struggle. No prints. just blood sprayed in a circle around the body, like it had been spun in place. I radioed it in, logged the location, and kept moving. Protocol. That night I camped at the ridge, made a fire, read a little, dozed off with my boots still on and the radio beside me. Woke up at 2:41 a.m. to the sound of breathing outside the tent. Not snorting, not animal, breathing. Slow, intentional. Right outside, I didn't move. Didn't even unzip the flap, just waited. Then something scraped across the nylon. 3 claws. I sat there frozen. My sidearm was in the bag near my feet. I didn't reach for it. The breathing stopped. Then it said my name, whispered. Travis. The voice wasn't right. It sounded like someone trying to speak through a mouth full of broken glass. Too low. Too wrong. I didn't sleep after that. Come dawn, I stepped out and found tracks circling the tent. Not boots, not paws, something in between. Digits splayed like a canine, but with weight distribution that said upright. Clawed, yes, but walking bipedally. I followed them for a quarter mile. They led to a tree, one of the old giants. Scratch marks ran up the bark 8 feet high, and there, hanging from the lowest branch, was a strip of deer hide, tied in a knot. I returned to the station the next morning, chalked it up as unknown predator behavior, gave the report to my supervisor. He skimmed it, said, "You think you saw something weird up there, Boone?" "I know I did," I said. He didn't press, just nodded. A week later, I got called out again. 2 hikers missing near Chestnut Top Trail. When we found their packs, they were untouched. Food, gear, everything there. But no footprints leaving the site. Just claw marks in the dirt, leading out into the trees. The same day, one of our trail cams triggered 3 times between 1 o'clock and 1:07 a.m. The first frame was empty. The second had a blur, motion caught low to the ground. The third, I'll never forget it. A shape half in frame, covered in dark fur. The outline of a head that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human. Eyes glowing, mouth open in a snarl. Teeth longer than any bear's. The timestamp read 1 hour 6 minutes and 59 seconds a.m. The camera stopped working after that. They pulled me off solo duty for 2 months. Said it was routine, reassignment, but every now and then I'll be walking tree line behind the station and find a clawed mark in the bark. Sometimes I hear it in the wind, Travis, like it remembers me, like it's waiting for me to come back to the ridge. I never do, but I know one day I will, and I'm not sure I'll walk away a second time. My name is Dane Holloway, and I serve as a ranger in the whole rainforest section of Olympic National Park, Washington. Most folks only ever see the paved trails, the dripping moss, the moss-draped maples, the streams that whisper through cathedral groves. But there are places deeper in, places the park maps don't show. We call it Sector 9. It's unofficial, of course. An old ranger term for the territory past the Upper Hoe River where the trails thin out and the moss hangs like curtains. Few go there, fewer come back wanting to talk about it. I was called to check on that sector in mid-October. A fire watch drone had picked up strange movement patterns and heat signatures, too tall, too slow to be deer, but consistent. Maybe a rogue camper, maybe a cougar. I volunteered. Took my pack, my sidearm, and the quiet kind of curiosity you get after 3 years living among silence and shadow. Day 1 was uneventful. Rain, mud, the usual. Elk bugled in the distance. The trees wept slowly, like they always do. I camped beneath an ancient Sitka spruce and drifted to sleep listening to water drip from ferns. At 3:22 a.m., I woke up to the sound of breathing. Not far, deep, steady, rhythmic. It was just beyond the edge of the firelight. I sat up slowly, grabbed my flashlight, and scanned the trees. Nothing. No eye shine. No sound of retreat. Just the forest. But the fire was out, snuffed. Not burned down, snuffed. I stayed awake the rest of the night. At dawn I found footprints. Huge. Easily 20 inches long, 6 inches wide. Toes visible. No claw marks. The stride between them was over 5 feet. Not bear, not human. I followed them. The trail wove through ravines and fallen logs deeper than I'd ever gone. The forest closed around me until the light barely reached the ground. That's when I heard the knocking. 2 sharp raps, then silence, then 3 more, from another direction, then a third, farther away. Communication. I turned to leave and came face to face with a wall of fur. It stood maybe 30 feet away, half shadowed in the mist. 8 feet tall, broad, covered in dark brown hair matted with mud and bramble. Its arms hung long and slack, but its eyes met mine, and it blinked. No roar, no charge, just a slow step backward. Then another. Then it turned and vanished between the trees like smoke. I stood there shaking, not with fear, with awe. Whatever it was, it had chosen not to be seen. Back at camp that night, I found something near my tent, a bundle of moss, twigs braided together, and one of my spare water bottles placed gently on the log beside the fire pit. Like a gift or a gesture, I stayed one more night. No breathing, no knocking, just the silence of mutual understanding. When I returned to the station, I didn't tell the others what I saw. I filed the report. Unusual wildlife signs. Large mammal activity observed. No danger detected, but I knew there's something out there in the rainforest, something old, something watching, and sometimes when it chooses, it lets you see it. Not to frighten, but to remind you whose forest it really is. My name is Dr. Lena Kovar, and until 6 weeks ago, my life revolved around dusty manuscripts, lost dialects, and phonetic transcription. I'm a professor of comparative linguistics at Charles University in Prague, with a specialization in pre-Indo-European root systems and unclassified symbol sets. That's a long way of saying no one really cared what I did. Not until the Czech government quietly pulled me from my winter sabbatical with no explanation, handed me a non-disclosure agreement thicker than any textbook I've ever written, and told me my expertise was urgently required at a secure underground site near the Bohemian Karst Caves. It started with a discovery by a private drilling company working southwest of the city. They were supposed to be laying geothermal lines, but at a depth of 180 meters. Their equipment struck something artificial, an unmarked stone wall embedded deep in the limestone. A government survey team was called in. Within hours, operations were shut down and the site sealed off. 2 days later, I was escorted to a Cold War-era military facility that hadn't been used in decades. I still remember my escort's face, a middle-aged man in a plain black coat with no insignia. He never introduced himself, never explained who he worked for. He just handed me a folder as we descended in the service elevator. I opened it expecting to find documents. Instead, there were photos, high-resolution images of strange markings carved into a curved stone surface. My breath caught. They weren't from any known language group, not even close. Some of the symbols resembled sound-based glyphs, articulation maps I'd seen only in reconstructed proto-languages, but others defied all classification. A looping spiral at the center was repeated in multiple forms. One version looked etched with surgical precision. Another appeared melted into the stone itself, as if from intense localized heat. Beneath the images, someone had scrawled in red ink, "Reacts to sound." That was when I knew this was no ordinary job. The facility beneath the caves was an active construction site, disguised as a decommissioned research outpost. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Not just the usual underground chill, but something sharper. At the lowest level, they'd reinforced an old limestone chamber with steel beams and floodlights. At the far end of the room was the object from the photos, a massive stone arch, nearly 10 feet high, embedded in the wall like the entrance to an ancient temple. Its surface was covered in those same impossible symbols. They glistened faintly in the floodlights, as if absorbing and refracting the light in ways stone shouldn't. When I approached, my skin prickled. I instinctively touched my throat. Something about the air felt wrong, thinner, vibrating. My handler, still silent, handed me a tablet. On it was a waveform audio file. I tapped play. The sound was short, a low-pitched harmonic tone that faded in and out. It resembled a didgeridoo, but deeper, almost subsonic. As it played, I watched the stone. At first, nothing happened. Then I noticed a spiral symbol near the arch's apex. It shimmered. No, it pulsed. Very faintly, the stone responded to the tone. That's when the whispering began. It came from everywhere, not loud, not distinct, but layered like a dozen voices trying to speak at once in a language I couldn't understand. I turned to my handler. "You recorded that?" He shook his head. "Wasn't there before." That was my first day. Over the next week, I worked with a small research team in total isolation. We weren't told where the funding came from, only that we were studying a cultural anomaly of unknown origin. I had no idea how far this operation extended globally. All I knew was the whispers intensified every time we played certain frequencies. It wasn't just pitch, it was rhythm, breath, cadence. The voice mattered. I began running phonetic patterns through the arch, reciting linguistic nonsense, experimenting with tone and tempo. At times, the stone would ripple subtly, like sound was interacting with something behind it. I recorded everything. Day 4, I spoke the reconstructed form of a neuralic root for threshold. The whispering cut off immediately. Then a word came back, one I didn't recognize, 4 syllables. I played the recording over and over again, trying to isolate the phonemes. I don't know why I spoke it aloud, but I did, and something knocked, not a sound from the air. From the stone itself, 3 dull knocks, slow and deliberate, not an echo, not random, a response. I backed away, adrenaline spiking. One of the junior researchers, Pavel, went pale and bolted for the exit corridor. He never came back to the project. We were told he had respiratory issues and returned to his family in Ostrava. I knew better. Pavel had heard something in those knocks that scared him on a level he couldn't explain. I felt it, too, not fear of a monster, but the fear of being acknowledged by something watching through a keyhole. Something intelligent. That night, my dreams changed. I found myself standing before the arch, but the room was dark. No floodlights, no team. Just me and the symbols, glowing faintly. I spoke the word again, the one I had heard in the whispers. The arch split open like a sphincter of stone, spiraling wide into a corridor of impossible geometry, all angles that bent toward me and stretched backward at the same time. The cold air rushed out in a wave, but with it came a voice. It spoke through me, not in words I understood, but in memory. I felt my childhood home, the sound of my father coughing in the next room, my mother's voice, but it twisted, the intonation wrong, the syntax reversed. We know you. You are of the throat. You are of the opening. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The temperature in my quarters was -3 degrees Celsius. My breath fogged in front of me. The heater was on. 3 days later, I returned to the site with a recording I had constructed, a carefully sequenced pattern of phonemes mimicking the spiral glyph's resonance frequency. When I played it, the arch vibrated. I don't mean a subtle tremble. The steel beams around the chamber groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then a fracture appeared down the middle of the arch. Not a crack, a gap. A vertical seam opened like a sealed tomb, splitting from pressure inside. From within came a humming sound, like distant choirs submerged in static. The cold spiked instantly. Our instruments dropped below -20 degrees Celsius. Frost formed on the observation window. My tablet shorted out. And in the center of the fracture, an eye opened. It wasn't organic, it didn't blink, but I felt it see me. Everyone else fled. I stayed. Not by courage I was held, like gravity turned inward. The spiral glowed. I felt a pressure in my throat, like the urge to speak, but no breath. The voice came again. Not your door, not your mouth. Then the fracture closed, stone sealing like skin. The temperature rose, and the whispers stopped. The project was shut down 48 hours later. All documentation confiscated. My team scattered. My handler vanished. I was given a plane ticket, a burner phone, and an NDA renewed with legal threats I still wake up sweating from. They thought it was over. They were wrong, because now, wherever I go, I hear it, the tone, the spiral, in fans, in pipes, in my own breath. A few nights ago, I whispered that 4-syllable word into the darkness again, just to see, and the heater knocked 3 times, just like before. There are doors under this world, not built, but grown, not to enter, but to listen, and now they know I speak the language. God help me. I think they're learning how to speak it back. It started with the birds. 3 days after I returned to Prague, I noticed them. Not the way people notice birds in spring when the city starts to thaw and the trees wake up, no. I mean they stopped singing. On the Charles University campus, the trees are full of life even in winter, pigeons, sparrows, the odd blackbird. But on the morning of March 12th, as I crossed the quad, I realized something had gone wrong. The air was silent. Not dead silent, but stretched like a room waiting for something to speak. And I felt it in my ears, not my chest, like pressure before a storm. I tried to write it off: jet lag, cold air, post-traumatic stress. I hadn't told anyone what happened in the Bohemian Karst caves. Not really. They classified the entire operation 2 days after I was discharged. And I'd signed enough non-disclosure paperwork to bury me for life. But the birds, the silence, the vibrations, something was still listening. My flat on Zlata Street became a fortress. I blocked every vent, covered every mirror. I refused to speak in the shower, the bedroom, or the kitchen, just in case. I wore earplugs at night. But the sounds got smarter. The night of March 16th, I was reviewing old phonetic recordings from a field study in southern Finland. Nothing unusual, just vowel shifts in an endangered semi-dialect, when the waveform on my laptop spiked. I thought it was interference. But when I isolated the spike and slowed the audio, it formed a syllable. Li, na. I didn't say anything. None of the speakers had. The voice came from under the waveform, beneath the human register. It had learned my name. That night I dreamed of the fracture again, of the spiral splitting the stone. Only this time, the eye didn't just open. It blinked. I did what any academic does under pressure. I went to the archive. Charles University's Phonetic Archive is a vault beneath the language faculty. 200 years of recordings, notes, and samples locked in temperature-controlled cases. No one uses it at night, which made it perfect. I brought my laptop, sound equipment, and every recording I had from the cave. My plan was simple: find patterns. If the door responded to sound, it meant resonance mattered. There had to be a harmonic sequence, a key to unlock it safely. But by midnight I had nothing. Just the spiral symbol, sketched 100 ways on a dozen pages, and that same 4-syllable word that had split the door open. Esunari Thou. The moment I whispered it aloud, quietly, cautiously, surrounded by stone, the room changed. The walls pressed inward. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. I turned toward the stairwell and saw a shadow at the glass. It wasn't human. The glass door to the archive is reinforced, thick, curved, with a metal handle shaped like a tuning fork. On the other side stood a shape, not a person, a vertical smear, like heat rising off asphalt, but dense. It didn't move like flesh. It pulsed, syncing with my breathing, until I stopped breathing altogether. The lights in the hallway behind it flickered. My ears popped. And then it knocked 3 slow knocks. Just like in the cave. The same rhythm, the same cold. I reached for the recording mic without thinking, pressed record. The waveform stayed flat. No knock, no breath, no ambient sound. Then the wave rose, a new word, not from outside the door, from inside the archive. I turned too fast. My vision spun. The lights dimmed. Behind the last row of shelves, something whispered, "We are of the opening." Let us learn your shape. I don't remember how I got home. The security footage from the university archives was wiped. My laptop recorded nothing but a single line of symbols, rendered by software that shouldn't be able to process phonetics into glyphs, but I recognized them. The same spiral patterns I saw carved into the first door. They now formed a ring, a portal. I've received 3 emails since, each from addresses that don't exist. Each one says the same thing. We are at the threshold. The stone speaks through mouths that forget they are doors. My mouth is dry, constantly, like I'm forgetting how to swallow. My own voice has started to echo in strange ways. Sometimes it finishes my thoughts before I do. Tonight I'm going back. There's a sealed vault in the catacombs beneath the archive, closed since the 1800s. I checked the old schematics. No one has a key, but the wall on the north side hums when I stand close and say that word again, Esunarithal. I think they want me to open it. I think it's another door, and I think this one doesn't need to be traced. It just needs to be sung. I've spent most of my adult life tracking water, river behavior, permafrost shifts, aquifer depletion. It's the kind of work that either bores people stiff or terrifies them once they realize what it implies. I was posted to Eagle Plains 2 months ago. Population 8 on a good week, 0 on a bad one. Northwest of Dawson City, just below the Arctic Circle. My job was to study the thaw line, because it's rising. That's not a theory, that's not politics. That's field data. The ice is thinning faster than our worst projections, and something's changing underneath it. The ground isn't just warming, it's shifting, like something's moving inside it. At first, I thought it was glacial melt destabilizing the sublayers. I was wrong. The thing about the Yukon in late February is that everything lies to you. Your compass twitches even when the wind's still. The sun barely rises, then vanishes sideways. The air feels thin despite the altitude, like the cold once you quiet. The first anomaly showed up during a bore test. I drilled to 6 meters expecting dense permafrost or compacted ice, same as every core I'd taken before, but at 5.8 meters the drill bit hit nothing, a hollow space, perfectly circular, smooth-walled, as if something had melted a sphere into the ice from the inside out. I lowered a thermal probe. The temperature inside was minus 37 degrees Celsius, same as ambient, but the probe's acoustic sensor picked up a faint vibration. Not a hum, not a whir, a tone, pulsing every 9 seconds. Subsonic, human ears wouldn't catch it, but I could feel it in my teeth. I flagged the data. Took a core sample anyway. The ice came up clean. Too clean. No sediment. No trapped oxygen. No layered crystal patterns like you'd expect in ancient frost. This wasn't ice formed by nature. It was refrozen, as if something had pushed outward and the permafrost sealed around it. That was day 1. Day 2, I heard the knocking. I was analyzing the sample under low light magnification in the camp lab when something struck the cargo container wall. 3 knocks, spaced apart, deliberate, not wind, not snow. I froze. I waited, heart thudding. Then it came again, same pattern, dull, muffled, from below the floor. The container sat on solid ice. There was nothing beneath it but frozen ground, unless something had moved. I strapped on my boots and went outside with a flashlight and a 357 I kept hidden in my tool bag. Not standard issue, but out here, standard doesn't mean much. There were no tracks, no signs of wildlife, just wind-carved snowdrifts and the moan of cold air through the tree line. But when I stood over the borehole, I felt it again. The tone, stronger now, and layered. I called it in to Parks Canada the next morning, asked if any seismic sensors had picked up microquakes or underground movement. They hadn't. The regional office told me the cold might be playing tricks on my instruments. That night I woke to my own voice playing back from the field recorder. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even spoken into it. But there it was, my voice isolated, clipped, replaying a single word I hadn't said aloud in years. Open. By day 4, I stopped pretending this was a geological anomaly. The ice core started melting on its own inside a sealed negative temp unit. When I checked the time-lapse footage, I watched frost pull away from the central spiral etched into the surface. Not carved, grown, like a branching root system, but geometric, curved, too precise. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. At 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 22 seconds, the lens fogged for exactly 6 seconds. When it cleared, the spiral had shifted, not melted, moved. I replayed the footage until my battery ran dry. On day 5, I drilled again. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Stubbornness. Whatever was under that ice had to be catalogued. The new shaft was angled, deeper. I lowered a camera. At 14 meters, the walls changed from pale blue to dark gray. Ice gave way to something else. Not stone, not metal. The camera couldn't focus properly. Every surface rippled like liquid, but held its shape. Then the signal cut out. Seconds before it died, the screen showed a circle in the floor. Not a pool, not an object. A mouth. I don't mean jaws or teeth. I mean a structure shaped like an orifice. An opening rimmed by symbols that pulsed faintly under the flashlight. Like the glyphs were breathing. The spiral pattern sat at the center. And from that spiral came a voice, low, rhythmic, impossible. Not from the speaker, from inside my head. We remember the warmth of the mouth. You are of the water, you are of the thaw. Speak the word. I blacked out. When I came to, it was nearly dark. The sky had turned purple, and my boots were full of melted snow. The borehole was gone. I don't mean filled. I mean vanished, covered by solid, untouched ice. And on my recorder, which hadn't been powered on, a new voice looped, soft, feminine. We are melting into you. I haven't left. I don't know how. Every time I pack, something breaks. The generator dies. The snowmobile won't start. My satellite phone just bleeds static, but the whispers are louder now, clearer. I hear them in the ice, in the pipes, in the shape of my breath. I know they're waiting for spring, waiting for the thaw, because when the river floods, when the snow gives way, when enough doors open, they will come through. And it will sound like a voice you trust whispering your name back to you, through water, through bone, through the last crack in the ice. We were never supposed to dig that deep. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest known temple complex in the world. 11,000 years buried under the Anatolian Plateau, far older than Stonehenge or the pyramids. But most of it is still hidden, layers we haven't touched. At least that's what the Turkish Ministry of Culture believed until 2 weeks ago, when a research team opened a shaft beneath Enclosure D. They called it anomalous voiding, a natural chamber sealed in soft limestone, untouched since the pre-pottery Neolithic. On day 3 of the excavation, they stopped reporting in. That's when they called me. My name is Farah Elamin. I work with UNESCO's Emergency Heritage Response Unit, a bureaucratic way of saying I get flown to old ruins when someone screws up badly enough to risk the site or themselves. The moment I stepped onto the plateau, I knew something was wrong. The site was silent. No wind, no generator hum, no footsteps crunching the gravel paths between enclosures, just blistering heat and the strange smell of iron dust in the air. I found the lead archaeologist's tent unzipped and empty, coffee still hot on the burner, a notebook open to a page that just read. It's not a temple, it's a mouth, and it remembers how to open. I descended into the shaft with a helmet cam, a radio, and an armed cultural guard named Tamer. The opening was narrow, claustrophobic, like crawling through a throat. The limestone had been smoothed, unnaturally clean, like it had been worn from the inside. After 20 meters, we reached the chamber. That's where we found them, 8 members of the excavation team. Not dead, not injured, just standing motionless in a perfect circle around the far wall. They were barefoot, their eyes open but unblinking. No one responded when we called their names. Tamer whispered something in Arabic under his breath. Jinn. I'm not religious, but in that moment I understood the instinct. Then the lights dimmed. The far wall was covered in dust at first, but when Tamer approached, his shoulder brushed it, and the powder sloughed away like dry skin. What lay beneath wasn't rock. It was metal, not copper, not gold, something darker, dull gray with faint glyphs etched into its surface, symbols arranged in tight loops and arcs. My pulse spiked. I recognized the pattern, spiral-based, radiating, a kind of logic that defied language. One of the researchers, a woman named Daria, stepped forward. She whispered a word I didn't understand. The glyphs on the metal glowed just for a second. Then we heard the breath. Not wind, not air displacement, a breath from the other side. The ground shook. The metal flexed like fabric under strain. Then it clicked, 3 soft knocks. The same rhythm I'd seen in a report from the Czech Republic. The same knocking mentioned in the banned transcript from the Colorado mine. I knew then this wasn't an isolated event. It was one of the doors. Tamer pulled me back. Smart. We ran the ascent line. I turned once just before crawling back into the shaft and saw Daria still facing the metal wall. She turned to look at me and smiled, but her lips didn't move. Only her eyes did. The expression didn't belong on her face. It wasn't hers. I scrambled up. Back at base, the camp was in chaos. Radios failing. GPS going haywire. The site map had shifted. Tents not where they were an hour ago. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but no wind had passed. Even the sun felt wrong, too low for the hour. Shadows too long. I pulled the footage. My helmet cam had recorded everything, except the glyphs. That portion of the wall was a blur. Corrupted pixels where the spiral should be, just like the other door reports, just like Lena Kovar's sealed vault in Prague. That night I dreamt I was underground again, but this time I wasn't standing in the chamber. I was on the other side of the wall. The glyphs glowed faintly behind me, casting sickly shadows on the cavern walls. I wasn't alone. Something stood in the dark, watching, breathing in tandem with me. Then I heard my voice, speaking words I didn't know, words shaped like vowels, but longer. Soon, not spoken, and behind the voice another knock dot 3 times. Then silence. When I woke, I was outside my tent, standing, barefoot, feet pointed toward the shaft. I never sleepwalk. Until now. I submitted my report the next day, requested emergency quarantine of the site, requested UNESCO reroute all digs in the region. I used the phrase non-cultural anomaly, the strongest language I could legally use. It was denied. A new team is being flown in tomorrow. Their instructions are to finish opening the wall. I've forwarded everything, the corrupted footage, the transcripts, the spiral glyph sketches, to a private list of international contacts. People like Dr. Griffin Hayes, Lena Kovar, and a Canadian field tech named Rourke, who wrote me back immediately. We've seen the spiral. Don't let them open it. It's a door, but not for us. I'm not going back to Istanbul. I'm staying here, because the chamber hasn't been sealed. Because the glyphs are growing, visible now even in the soil outside the shaft. Because I just stood still for 15 minutes without realizing it, breathing in sync with something that's still knocking beneath the dust. And last night I whispered a word in my sleep. My voice recorder captured it. Su Nari Thou. We weren't looking for structures. We were digging for bones. Specifically, at Charker Odontor, one of the last big predators before the extinction. My team had been working the New Queen Basin for 7 months, and until last week we were making textbook progress. Then we found the slab. The rock was too smooth. It didn't belong to any known layer in the stratigraphy. It was buried beneath 80 million years of sandstone, and yet it looked new. More unsettling, the surface hummed when you touched it. At first, we thought it was seismic vibration, but there were no quakes, no tectonic movement, just a low-frequency resonance that made your bones feel hollow. I radioed the university in Mendoza and sent samples for testing. While we waited, I ran a microscanner over the slab. The readings made no sense. No fractures, no mineral inclusions, no cellular structure at all. It wasn't stone, not fossil, not metal, nothing identifiable. Then Camila, our sedimentologist, found the symbol. It was shallow, almost imperceptible, a spiral etched into the center of the slab, perfectly geometric. At first it looked like erosion, but the lines were too clean, too intentional. She traced it with her fingertip. The hum grew louder, And that night, she walked 3 kilometers into the desert barefoot. We found her at dawn, kneeling in a dry riverbed, her hands caked with soil, whispering something under her breath. The same 3 words over and over. We are returning. I tried to fly her out the next morning, but the dust storm hit. Satellite phone died. Solar charger wouldn't work. Our GPS trackers started showing duplicate pings, 2 signals for the same person in different locations. Camilla didn't sleep after that. She said the slab was singing now, calling others. And she wasn't wrong. That evening, one of our assistants started digging beside it, even though I'd ordered the area roped off. He said he heard something moving underneath, like animals breathing. I took his shovel away. He tried to bite me. By day 5, the slab's hum had become audible to everyone. No equipment needed. A low rhythmic drone pulsing every 8 seconds. It made our teeth ache, and then it opened. Not with a crack or a pop, just parted, like a seam splitting in leather. The center spiral twisted once, then slowly receded. Beneath it wasn't stone or dirt. It was black, not darkness, not absence of light, something impossibly deep. Camilla leaned in close. I tried to stop her, but she whispered a phrase I'd never taught her. Not Spanish, not Latin. Ena's own Nari, thou. And the darkness moved. We fled the site, left behind all our equipment. The slab, our samples, everything. 2 days later, the university called to say the courier we'd sent with the fossil fragment never arrived. No GPS record. No vehicle trace. It's like he'd vanished from the highway. 3 weeks have passed. I'm back in Mendoza now. But something's wrong. The humming followed me. It's faint, but constant, like a pressure in the skull. Sometimes I hear whispers at night. Sometimes I wake up with dust on my fingers. I reviewed the photos we took before the slab opened. The spiral symbol appeared twice. Once on the slab, once beneath it, carved into the fossilized skull of the Charcrodonto, as if it had been there long before the dinosaur died. I've been in contact with others now, a network. Researchers from Prague, Chile, India, even the Yukon. They've seen it too. The spiral, the hum, the knocking. They call them doors. I think they're right, but I don't think we're opening them. I think they're digging up through us. Because last night I ran a frequency match on the hum, the one recorded from the slab. It matches an echo pattern recorded in Turkey 6 months ago, and again in Colorado 4 months before that. Same resonance, same spiral, same word etched into the data log. Coming through. When the train hit the signal fault just past KM post 1116, I figured it was another freeze. Winter in Khabarovsk makes iron brittle and sensors go blind. Every few years a buried cable cracks under the weight of the permafrost, or relay shorts from condensation. We patch it, we curse, we thaw the line with diesel torches and keep the trains moving. That's the job. What I didn't expect, what none of us expected, was that the fault came from a track that wasn't on the system. A dead-end spur, one that shouldn't exist. It ran half a kilometer south of the main line. Bent iron, cracked timber, rusted to hell and coated in centuries of frost heave. We didn't build it. It wasn't in any map from Soviet rail archives, not even in the old imperial records. And yet, there it was. I've been in rail operations for 27 years. Spent half my life walking lines, reading signal voltage, yelling at new techs who don't know a frozen weld from a broken one. So when I saw that spur, when I followed it on foot, down a slope into the trees, past birch and stiff in the snow, I knew something was wrong. The steel didn't match standard gauge. The ties weren't creosote, they were carved with symbols. Spirals. We traced a line to a collapsed platform. Ancient wood and concrete, overtaken by frost and moss. There was a rusted sign just visible beneath the snowdrift, almost unreadable until I cleared it with my glove. It didn't say a station name. It said, "Do not follow the track," in 3 languages. Old Russian, Mandarin, something else I didn't recognize. The snow started falling harder then, thicker, and the air had that pressure you feel when a freight is coming. Low, distant, heavy, but the tracks were empty. There was no train, just that hum, that vibration rising up through my boots like something breathing under the frost. I called it in. My supervisor told me to clear the line and return to the main track. I didn't listen, because as I stood there in the trees, the snow melting just slightly around my boots in a perfect circle, I saw something further down the spur. A door, metal, set into the slope like a bunker, covered in frost and lichen, carved with that same spiral pattern we'd seen on the ties. But it wasn't just a door. It was sealed, heavy iron clasps, stone around the edges, sunk into the hill like it had always been there. And on the center, 3 indents, knuckles, like something had knocked hard from the inside. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I hiked back alone. Before sunrise, the door was still there, but the snow around it was different, flattened, melted, as if something had walked out, then walked back in. I took photos with my work phone, none of them saved, all of them corrupted, just static and gray spirals. I started hearing frequencies in the main relay shed 2 days later. Low pulse tones, repeating patterns. At first I thought it was feedback from the switchyard antennas, but the pulses didn't match any transmission band. I plotted them on paper. They drew a shape, not a wave, a spiral. I sent the data to a systems engineer in Vladivostok I'd worked with before. He called me back the next morning. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but your signal, it's not coming from any active track relay." I asked where it was coming from. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "You're not going to believe this. It's coming from under the track." The next day they shut down the spur. A military team arrived by air, unmarked chopper. Quiet, fast, no emblems. I was told not to return. They gave me leave, paid, extended. But I couldn't stop dreaming about the door, the knocks, the pressure. 3 weeks later, the snow melted enough for a landslide to hit the main line north of us, buried 6 cars. No fatalities. But during the excavation, a secondary team uncovered a concrete support tunnel beneath the hillside, one that wasn't on any construction record. They sent in a camera drone. The video feed cut out after 8 minutes. The last frame before the blackout showed a second door embedded in the far wall. Same dimensions, same shape, same spiral symbol, The report was sealed that night. The site was quarantined. Since then, I've been tracking other signal techs, other workers along the rail spine, people who've heard the knocks, felt the hum, who've seen the snow melt in circles even at -30. There are more. A signal controller in Omsk who quit after hearing footsteps in the ice. A welder in Irkutsk who blacked out during a maintenance call and woke up 6 kilometers down line. An engineer in Yekaterinburg who claims she saw a train with no number pass through her yard at 3:13 a.m. and the camera footage shows nothing, just snow. And that hum, always the hum. They think these doors are isolated. They're not. They follow the track like veins, like roots. And I think the trains don't run on schedules anymore. I think they run on summons. You hear it in the steel. You feel it in the frost. Something is waking, and it's using the old paths to move. Yesterday, I walked the spur one last time. The frost had cracked in a perfect semicircle. The door wasn't closed anymore. It wasn't open either. It was ajar. Like someone had left it open just a crack, just enough to whisper. And through that crack I heard something echo, bouncing between the trees, off the rails, into my chest like a ghost through steel. Another train is coming. I came to Illilisset to study decay, glacial retreat, ice shelf collapse, climate acceleration. My postdoc work focused on the Jakobshavd Glacier, one of the fastest retreating bodies of ice on Earth. It bleeds meltwater into the fjord like a vein that won't close. It's also loud, dot, pat. People don't realize that ice isn't silent. It groans, pops, shifts, carries vibrations miles beneath your feet. You learned to interpret the rhythm, to feel its movement in your chest. That's how I knew something was wrong before the equipment did. The glacier was still shifting, but now it was speaking. At first I assumed equipment failure. The anomaly came through our sub-ice hydrophone array on March 12th. A low-frequency pulse, long, slow repeating. But the rhythm wasn't random. 5 seconds on, 15 seconds off, over and over, like a heartbeat through stone. I ran spectral analysis. The waveform came back artificial, not seismic, not glacial, not marine. It was too precise, too clean. I logged it. I sent a report to Nuke. No reply. I replayed the signal in the lab that night, headphones on, scribbling a transcript of pulse lengths and decay. I didn't realize I was crying until the paper got wet. I wasn't sad. I wasn't afraid. But the sound, it made me remember things I never lived. Waking under frozen stone, breathing water, watching the spiral turn. On March 14th, the echo stopped. In its place, a voice. Not in any language I knew. A tone, rhythmic and melodic, but wrong. Every syllable bent upward, like it was curving away from the world. I isolated a 5-second clip and ran it through linguistic comparison tools. Phonetic structures didn't match any known root language, but the tonal structure had symmetry, which means it was constructed, which means it had a source. I went outside. It was -29 degrees Celsius. Still dark. The horizon glowed silver over the fjord. And beneath the ice, deep beneath, I heard it again, not through headphones, not through equipment. In my bones, a spiral song, low and cold and patient. On March 16th, a rift opened near Borehole G. It wasn't seismic. There was no quake, no wind, just a vertical crack, clean, straight, 10 meters long, like a door cut through pressure-layered ice. I peered down into it, expecting rock. Instead, I saw stone. Not natural, smooth, patterned, etched with arcs and rings and spirals, the same spirals I'd seen in a research log from a mining collapse in Colorado. The same spirals I'd heard described by a glaciologist in Norway who'd gone missing in 2021 after reporting voices under a melting ice cave. And the longer I stared at the spirals, the more I felt drawn. That night I slept in 30-minute bursts. When I finally dreamt, it wasn't a dream. It was a perspective, looking up through water, through ice, through black sky that bent around my vision like a globe in reverse. Something turned slowly overhead like a lid, a massive slab of stone, covered in glyphs, rotating silently in a void above me. Lightless, soundless, not a place, a space. And I was underneath it, crawling toward the spiral. March 17th, I lowered a camera drone into the rift. It recorded for 2 minutes before losing signal. The last frame it sent back showed a tunnel, carved, not formed, geometric, descending into the ice in a spiral slope. Carved into the wall, a glyph I hadn't seen before. Not a spiral, an eye, horizontal, watching. I transmitted everything I had, footage, logs, sonar readings, to a private satellite uplink connected to a network of researchers I'd only heard whispers about. People who'd seen these things in other places. Remote places, buried places one name answered within an hour. Griffin Hayes. His message was brief. If you found the eye, it's already listening. I planned to evacuate, but the next morning the station had no power, no fuel, solar dead, batteries drained. All 3 emergency radios showed static. Outside, the glacier was silent. No pops, no creaks, no movement, only the hum, faint but constant, rising from the rift in the ice, making the snow around it vibrate like a pressure building, like a sound waiting for a mouth. On March 18th, at 3:13 a.m., the spiral opened. I don't know how else to say it. The tunnel changed, became warmer, melted outward, and then something spoke from within. It wasn't a language, it was recognition, the tone you use when calling someone home, and it said my name, clear as a bell. But wrong, like it had never needed to form it before. Ellen. Just once, then silence. I don't remember recording the final message, but I found it this morning on the station's backup recorder. My voice, breathy, distant, singing a lullaby my grandmother used to hum in Faroese, but she never taught me the words. The rift has widened. The glyphs are visible now on the ice above it, burned into the surface in a slow, spiraling frost. I know what it wants. It wants me awake. It wants me to listen. And tonight I will go down. I have to know what's beneath. Not just here. Everywhere, because the ice is melting too fast, and something buried is melting with it. Not dead, not asleep, just waiting. And the spiral is turning again. I was 19 when I first got assigned to Site Echo 9. Back then, they didn't call it anything classified, just the array, a stretch of reinforced antenna towers in the middle of the Mojave. Half the base was underground, half above, no insignia. No traffic in or out unless it was schedule locked. It was all hush-hush Cold War leftover stuff. My job? Maintain the signal lines? They never told us what it broadcasted or received. Hell, we didn't even know if it was operational. Most of the time, the panels just hummed. Low-frequency noise. Dead signal. But sometimes, late at night, usually, the lights on the main relay would flicker, and the room would get cold. Not desert cold, bone cold. They shut Echo 9 down in 1997, buried the access roads, removed funding, told us it was obsolete. I never went back until the call came last month. The request came from a subcontractor I'd never heard of, Rovente Systems, asking if I could consult on a facility reactivation in San Bernardino County. No other details. Just coordinates and pay that made my eyebrows go up. When I checked the map, my gut sank. The coordinates pointed to the base of an old ridge 10 miles east of where Echo 9 used to be, which made no sense, because the only thing out there is scrub, salt flats, and rock. But I went because I needed the money, and because some part of me, the part I'd buried for 25 years, wanted to know what really happened beneath that base. The structure wasn't marked on any satellite map. They'd built it recently. Steel framing, temporary shelters, floodlights. The desert hummed with generators, and at the center of it all was the shaft, reinforced concrete ring, 10 meters wide, descending straight into darkness. A sticker on the guardrail said, "Property of Department of Energy, Anomalous Subsurface Study, ECHOX. One of the engineers, young, nervous, handed me a data tablet. Signal readings began 4 weeks ago, from 1,300 feet below. Not terrestrial. You'll understand when you hear it. I heard it at 3:13 a.m. They played me the recording. It started like static, then a pulse, long, slow, deep thrum. Thrum, thrum. Exactly the same rhythm I used to hear from the relay room in the 90s. I didn't even realize I'd gripped the desk until my knuckles ached. But it wasn't just the hum that shook me. It was what came after, a voice, not human, not words, tones, winding upward in an impossible key, and between those tones just barely audible. A phrase, English, garbled. We are beneath your world. Listening still. I descended with the team on day 2. The shaft dropped straight for over 1,300 feet. Reinforced with old Soviet steel, they said. Leftover from a joint listening project in the 60s. A tunnel that never made the records. Halfway down, we passed a wall where the concrete was cracked in a perfect circle. No explosives. No pressure seam. Just opened, like something inside had needed out. At the bottom was a corridor, pre-stressed concrete, steel supports, the kind they used for early radar arrays and command bunkers, but none of it matched the schematics. The hallway turned gently as it went deeper, not built on angles, curved like a corkscrew. And the deeper we went, the colder it got. When my flashlight caught the far wall, my knees almost gave. There it was, the door, 8 feet tall, metal like obsidian, not smooth, not rough, etched with concentric spirals, every line razor precise. At the center, a shape I'd seen once before, back in 1996, in a grainy printout from a broken camera near relay panel 3B. The eye. One of the researchers stepped too close. She didn't touch it, just leaned in. That's when the symbols glowed. Soft, blue-green light, almost like algae bloom on black water. And we heard it, a knock, once, twice, pause, ... 3 times. They pulled us out of the shaft that night. Rovente shut the site, told the press it was a geothermal anomaly. But I knew better. I'd heard that knock before. 28 years ago, during my second week on base, I stayed late for a systems test. Around midnight, the main antenna began turning slowly toward the southeast. That was impossible. It was deactivated. And from the relay box I heard it, soft at first, then clear ... knock, knock. It came through the steel. I filed a report. They told me to keep quiet. The next morning, that relay room was welded shut. It's all connected. The knocks, the spirals, the doors. They've found them all over now. Russia, Chile, India, Greenland. They hum, they knock, they whisper, and they're opening again. Not from outside, from beneath. Yesterday, a researcher from Greenland sent me an audio file. Hydrophone data from beneath a collapsing glacier. I ran it through the same filters we used back in the day. Same pulses. Same frequency. Same 3 knocks. And buried beneath it, so faint I almost missed it, was the last thing I wanted to hear. A voice, a whisper, using my name. Wyatt, you were there when it began. So now I sit here in the dark typing this final report. The Mojave Array isn't just a dead project. It's a receiver. And something is transmitting again.